Do fast food workers ever sabotage meals when their customers behave like jerks? At an old pizza place I worked at, we all found out that our boss took some of our tip money from the jar for himself. That week, everyone who came in got extra free food. A dozen wings, you say? Here, have 30. Add 5 ranches to dip in. And no, the boss didn't wonder why he was suddenly getting so many praises from customers. Who are you kidding? We delivered lazily prepared, subpar pizza and fried foods to people who were blazed out of their minds and white trash. When I worked at McDonald's, I'd make the sandwiches look like the pictures if people were rude. This means putting all of the condiments on one side of the burger with the pickles hanging slightly out. You sick mother... About 10 years ago when I was working at KFC, I had an older lady start yelling at me as soon as she began talking. She also mentioned something about not smashing the biscuits. So I smashed the biscuits. Oh, I did something like this. Mean people got the sides placed on top of their biscuits, and I always carefully picked out the nicer pieces of chicken and biscuits for people who took the effort to not be a C-word to me. Look upon your slightly flattened biscuit and rue the day that you scoffed at me and then told me to hurry the hell up. Dunkin' Donuts. Always some jerk holding up the line because their coffee is a shade lighter than they wanted. Oh, and they wanted 3 cups of mocha, not 4, and all in the middle of that 6 a.m. rush. When you do that, that's when you get decaf. Once I had a lady who made me go through 15 wafer cones until I found the one that wasn't destroyed according to Her Majesty. Wafer cones are fragile and are prone to tiny chips around the edges, by the way. When I finally found one that she approved of, I pressed the ice cream into it just hard enough to create a strategically placed hairline crack. That crack would get worse and worse the more she bit into it, ultimately rendering the cone useless. Advanced wafer cone warfare? Cone of duty. Modern wafer. I once accidentally served a customer a smoothie with a bolt in it. It came off of our ice making machine and it had a plastic part in it. The customer came back in and showed me some of the plastic. I dumped the smoothie out in the sink and saw a massive screw. He asked me if I found anything else. I lied to him and made him a new smoothie while feeling very thankful. Well, this technically doesn't fit the description, but I had to go through the pain of vividly imagining breaking my teeth on the metal or getting my throat and mouth stabbed. So do you, listeners. I don't know why imagining any sort of internal mouth injury gives me the shudders so much. When I worked at Burger King, there was this one middle-aged lady who had come in once or twice a week and order a burger with extra onions. And no matter how many we put on, it was never enough. I'd put a sizable handful on, even though you're only supposed to put like 4 or 5 rings on it and then add a few more if they ask for extra. And it was just never enough for her. So one day she comes in and the store manager, surprisingly given the industry, she was actually pretty cool. She told me to put a lot on. So I put a huge handful on and my manager handed it to the customer while making sarcastic comments over the internal channel in our headsets. Sure enough, the lady came back and complained that it wasn't enough onions. Keep in mind, we already put, no joke, at least 20 times more onions in than we should have. So my manager, while swearing under her breath, handed me the burger and tells me to put some more onions on. Then before I got a chance to put any on, she was actually like, "No, forget this. Give me some of those gloves and I'll do it." She then proceeded to take almost half of the 2.5 kilo container of onions and dump it on the burger and rewrap it. The lady took it back to her seat while we all went out to the registers to watch. The look on her face when she opened that burger was priceless, and as far as I know, she never complained about not having enough onions after that. I worked at Wendy's for 2 years. I didn't necessarily punish the bad people, but I rewarded the good ones. For example, if it was a relatively slow day and a kind person came in who said things like please and thank you, I'd drop fresh fries for them so they were extra hot and crispy, even if they were relatively new fries. It's the little things that make life a lot better. I didn't ruin any food or drinks in this case, but when I worked at Starbucks, some guy was being a jerk, so I said, "Please don't be rude to me, sir," and it was the worst thing I've ever said to a customer. Probably the rudest I've ever been is when a customer chewed me out for something, it's been 6 or 7 years, I can't remember what it was, and then demanded to have my corporate's number so she could get me fired. I pointed to the sign on the counter, which included the number, looked her in the eye, and said, "I handed in my 2 weeks' notice 3 days ago. Do it." No, but once I was threatened with a punch to the face for getting a hair in someone's burger. Just so you know, it wasn't my hair. It might have come from his substance addict girlfriend that he was toting around who had blonde hair, like the hair he found on his burger. Pizza slinger here. I won't mess with your food, but I sure will shake the crap out of your 2 liters of soda in the car and smile as I hand it to you. One time at Burger King, I was working a particularly slow shift, and this little kid came in with just enough money for a cookies and cream ice cream. These things usually take 30 seconds to make, but the kid looked really excited, and since things were slow, I took an extra effort to make sure the Oreo cookies were nicely mixed into the ice cream, and that the ice cream itself was full to the brim of the cup. Well, my manager didn't like that at all, not the part about taking the extra minute or so on the kid's ice cream, nor the part about actually filling the cup. So he made me throw it out. In spite of my boss, though, I just made a bigger and better ice cream for that kid. I added the whole shabam. M&Ms, Oreos, choc flakes, choc sauce, the whole deal. Filled it up so much that it was practically worth 3 times as much as the kid paid, and I told him to run for it. I don't work in fast food, but as someone who works in retail, let me tell you this. If you're rude to me, you're getting the ugliest change in the drawer. When I worked at Wendy's, we used the overcooked burgers for the chili. If they look like they've been on the grill for too long, we just throw them into a pan in a heated drawer. We usually stayed open till 1 a.m., and one time someone came past 1 a.m. I'd already cleaned the grill and had no burgers left on it. The manager took the orders because this witch complained and demanded we take the order. Fine, I'll use this overcooked, dry burger that's been sitting in a pan all day. Not exactly proud of it, but I did it. I used to work at a sandwich shop. Company policy was 3 baby tomatoes per sandwich. Once a lady made me angry, and I only gave her 2. One guy was being a complete butthead to me in the drive-thru at McDonald's, so when he asked for extra pickles, I gave him no pickles. I still feel like a bad mother effer looking back on it. I worked at Subway, and a lady came through drive-thru. My Subway has a drive-thru, yes, what the frick. She drove past the order microphone and honked and knocked on the window. Slightly irritated, I opened it and took her order. She got bacon on her sandwich and asked for me to be sure it was crispy. Okay, sure. I give the order to my coworker and tell the lady it would be done in a jiffy. She restates that she wants it crispy, and that the idiot working last night when she drove through was stupid enough to not know what crispy was. I soon realized that I was that idiot. I tell her, okay, I'll make sure it's crispy. Walked over, took the bacon myself, charred the greasy hell out of that frickin' bacon. It essentially just crumbled and looked like pepper. I don't like having my intelligence insulted by someone who won't see me making their food. When I worked at a Taco Bell or KFC, we'd accidentally make orders wrong so the customer wouldn't want it. Then we'd sneak it off to the side and eat it. I had a friend in college who delivered pizzas. He'd have us call in an order, then call back several minutes later after it had been made and cancel it. When his shift was over, he'd get to keep it and bring it to us. And people think that fast food industry workers aren't smart. I think the intelligent ones simply just don't stay very long. I never did anything myself, but I witnessed a female employee blow her nose on a burger after a customer called her the C word. And she had a cold too. Yep, we were real classy at that Carbondale Steak and Shake. Well, I just gagged, but that customer deserved something, so regardless of how revolting this was, I'm gonna let it pass. I don't care how dissatisfied you are. Slurs like this just aren't cool when you're leveling them against your teenage server. When I used to work at a baseball park as a fry cook, I remember this one time the biggest witch of a woman came in and ordered a cheeseburger. No problem. Keep in mind this is a small little league non-profit run-of-the-mill baseball park with a concession stand, so don't expect 5-star quality stuff. She orders said cheeseburger, and I grabbed it off the heating plate thing that we had to keep all the food we made hot. I'd cooked those burgers not even 5 minutes before she came in, so they were still pretty damn fresh. She then says, excuse me, I want a fresh burger, not the one that's been sitting there. I explained to her that I just recently put those burgers out, but she wasn't having it, so I said, screw it, and went ahead and made her a fresh one. So, when I gave it to her, this charming specimen proceeded to say, what? There isn't any lettuce or tomatoes or anything on this burger. Like I said before, rinky-dink baseball park. You don't expect 5-star quality here. I pointed out the fridge that held all the condiments and told her they're all right there and that you just put what you'd like on your burger. She then threw the biggest witch fit I've ever seen, screaming things like, I'm not the one who works here. It's not my job to make my own burger. You're the one who gets paid for this, not me. Now you either fix my burger or I'm getting your manager. Again, I complied because it was my first job ever, and I was only 14 at the time, so of course I didn't want to get in trouble. Finally, I put all of her stuff on her burger, still trying to be as polite as possible. I wrap it up and hand it to her. And again, she is not satisfied. She tells me she wants her burger cut in half for her. By this time, I'm completely fed up. I ask her the reason she needed it cut, hoping that this entire ordeal was for her child, which I gladly would have done, or at least some reason for me to feel obligated to grant her request. Her reason was simply, because that's how I like my burgers and I won't eat them any other way. By this time, I'm screaming inside my own head, then fricking starve, witch. But again, 14, didn't want to lose my job, so I complied. But, like people say, you never tee off the people who handle your food. So I took her burger to the back to cut it, and instead of getting a clean knife, I grabbed what we call our go-to tool, which was an old knife that we used to dig out dirt or caked-up grease from the grill and deep fryer. Basically, every disgusting place you could think of, that knife had been there. Just for good measure, I scraped off some more gunk from anything I could find in my vicinity, and then cut her burger for her. I wiped the knife off on her burger, as if the burger itself were a cloth I was using to clean my knife. I came back, served her burger with a smile, and said, "Enjoy your meal." In short, the biggest witch ever came in asking for a burger that even a king or queen would find to be too much to ask for. I probably gave her some kind of stomach disease with a dirty knife that I used to cut the burger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It wasn't an actual customer, but I did do something gross once. I was working at Little Caesars Pizza. For a string of about 4 nights, we were getting a late-night, large order that the buyer just kept flaking on. If no one in the store wanted them, they'd ultimately be thrown away. Well, it just so happened that a car full of 4 or 5 college-aged kids would camp out back and asked if they could have what we were throwing out those same nights. After a few nights, it was obvious they were the ones making the calls. So I swept the floor and put all of the floor dirt and debris under the cheese. We gave it to them with the rest of the pizzas and never had a late-night order like that again. This one chick complained that her fresh fries weren't fresh enough, so when the next batch came, I avalanched them with salt. A guy in my town was once caught crapping in the beans at Taco Bell. As someone who spent a week in the hospital earlier this year with hemorrhagic E. coli contracted from a crappy restaurant, screw that crap. When I was a teenager, I worked at Burger King. This guy started verbally attacking me, saying his burger was cold. I apologized, assured him we'd make another, but he continued to be a right sausage about it. Fine, I assured him his next burger would be piping hot. I went and got a burger right off the grill and stuck it in the microwave for 2 minutes. I made the burger and carried it out to his table. I asked him to try it to make sure it was hot enough. I stood there sweetly smiling as he took a big bite and promptly burned his mouth. As he was frantically gulping down water, I asked him if it was hot enough. He nodded sullenly while still gulping down water. Still smiling, I said, "I'm so glad, sir," and nodded as if I was proud of a job well done. I turned on my heel, walking away, and felt like a queen for the rest of my shift. I licked the grilled cheese and pickles that my co-worker's ex-girlfriend ordered. She stole some of his military money and used it to buy substances. I'm well aware that what I did was disgusting, but that witch had it coming if you ask me. I never sabotaged, but if someone was rude, they were getting the lettuce that was wilted, or the tomato with the big splotch on it, or a salad that was just on the edge of expiring. If they were nice, they got fresh curly fries, mozzarella sticks, what have you. Also, we used to screw the corporation by holding the freezer door open, which blocked the office's window, while we ate by the fryer, or dropping extra moz sticks and jalapeno bites so we could eat them in secret. Also, if they ever bring them back, Arby's cheesecake bites are 1,000,000 times better frozen than fried. Tell your friends. Not on purpose, but the summer after my senior year of high school, I worked at a really busy pizza shop. It was not a chain, but a company with only 2 restaurants in the Minneapolis area, where everything was handmade. To the point of pouring flour, water, yeast, and salt into a big bowl and mixing it with an industrial bakery mixer for the crust. Tomatoes were pureed and seasoning was mixed in. Mushrooms were mixed with garlic and butter and baked. Cheese was sliced from a big brick with a meat slicer, one of those electric circular spinning blade things, but manual, the saw the back and forth kind of deals. Anyway, it was blazing hot that summer in 1988, and the kitchen was not air-conditioned. I had a drip of sweat run off my nose and into a pizza a couple of times. We were so busy that I couldn't take the time to do anything about it, so I just kept making the pizza. Hopefully my germies got baked to death in the oven. Well, while it's very sweet that you're feeling guilty about this after all these years, let me assure you that anyone who's ever eaten at more than a few restaurants in their lives statistically has to have consumed a tiny amount of baked sweat and breath vapor in their food. People are making your food, things happen sometimes, literally don't sweat the small stuff. I've worked at Pizza Hut for 7 months, and I've not seen any of my coworkers do anything to the food, although I've seen many customers claiming that their food has hair in it or has been improperly made to try and get it for free. Okay guys, I think I've won this one. Tim Allen would frequently stop in at the coffee shop I worked at in Colorado. When he came in, he always had a good 6 to 10 people in tow and would always order these super high-maintenance orders for drinks. Like 2.5 shots, 30% foam, 165 degrees Fahrenheit, just stupid crap. And worst of all, after doing this, he'd never tip. Never. I'm talking not even the leftover change. And to all of you saying, "Why should you expect a tip? You make coffee." Frick you, I get paid peanuts. Anyway, I decided to move back home and was leaving this place of employment in a few days. In walks the toolman himself with his 8 friends and family, and they order their drinks. Upon completing his beverage and handing it out, he took a sip and made a stupid little lemon face and said it was too hot. So I make him another drink and he complains that it wasn't stirred enough. So I remake the drink and he looks at me again and says, "I can taste the decaf, you know," with a smug little look on his face. I think to myself, I'll give you something you can taste. I took the lid for his drink under my apron and proceeded to paint every part of the lid with my hairy family jewels, inside and out. I handed it out along with a free drink coupon and that's it. He frickin' loved that drink. In short, I teabagged Tim the Toolman Taylor with a tasty, testy treat. I cannot confirm if he went, "Eh?" when he drank it. No, but I've worked in real restaurants where buttholes would sabotage the food because they were angry with the owner. They'd screw up orders to waste food and cost money, F stuff up when the health inspectors came, soap the soup to make people sick, and just flat out steal food and booze. I used to work at a pizza joint and there were plenty of times I wanted to sneeze on the pizza when a customer was a butthole to me or the person on the phone, but I could just never bring myself to do it. I'm Canadian though, so I might not count. Some cop asked for a liter of cola and was being a jerk about it, so I stabbed a hole in the side and covered it with a promotional peel-away sticker. Man, that guy was mad. When I was in high school, I had a very quiet and shy friend. I'd frequently decide to fight her battles for her. She dated a guy who ended up cheating on her. Shortly after, he came through the drive-thru of a local fast food joint I was working at. He ordered some fancy blended coffee drink thing, and I mixed a bunch of dirty mop bucket water into his drink before serving it to him. Screw that guy. Other than that, I've never messed with a customer's meal or service no matter how much of a butt they were. While working at the same fast food place, a middle-aged couple came through in their old beater truck. They ordered something like a small fries, small drink, and 1 burger. When they rolled up to the window, the smell of strong Mary J came pouring out of their car and into the drive-thru window. I figured they had to be hungrier than what they ordered, so I gave them an extra couple of large fries, large soda, and a large milkshake. I couldn't get away with giving them free burgers. As a thanks, they offered me a hit, so I hung out the window into their truck and took a puff or two. It felt good, man. I forgot the pickles. On purpose. Chef for 11 years now. Never have I or a colleague done anything to foul anyone's meal. If I saw that happen, I'd throw out the offending dish, banish the chef, and call the cops. We're professionals. We act professional. Well, I can see that the internet has its own blind justice when it comes to vengeance, and their idea of a mean person is very black and white. I don't want to sound like a crusader, but I worked as a Starbucks barista in the Jewel drive-thru cafe once. Anytime I had a difficult person, I'd try 10 times as hard to please them, because who am I to judge someone's bad day? I want people to know that even though they're angry, my encounter with them can maybe liven up their day. I have a few stories where I went that extra mile and increased my team's tip revenue because of it. Good people, we are the only ones that can control our actions. And vengeance, in my humble opinion, is a defense mechanism that helps nobody. At the same time, when a customer enters into a business transaction with another human being, they've got no right to be a total C-word regardless of how their day's been. I've had many days where I'm in a crap mood, but that crap doesn't mean I can take it out on the teen at the frickin' drive-thru just so they can hopefully play psychiatrist and help my day. I used to work at Subway. One lady came in and started yelling at me while my boss was trying to tell me something relatively important. It was already pretty busy, and this lady had waltzed to the front of the queue and demanded I make her a sandwich. I asked her to wait a few seconds while I finished talking and listening to my boss, who was already mid-conversation. The lady said something like, "This isn't good enough," and left $5 on the bench and told me to make her whatever sandwich and she'd be back in 5 minutes. I made her a veggie patty with lettuce, a frickload of jalapenos, and red wine vinaigrette, which any sandwich artist in the world will tell you is the most foul sauce ever known to man. One of my coworkers sniffed that sauce and just blew chunks one day. She came back 20 minutes later, picked up her sandwich and change, and probably didn't enjoy the rest of her day. When I was a teenager, I threw a chicken patty on a fillet of fish when we were busy, and the fish was still cooking. The customer did nothing to make me angry, and I feel bad for it today. What blew prisoners' minds about life outside after serving long sentences? My cellie was locked up for 20 years before he was in jail with me. He got locked up again for beating up somebody who was talking crap at a bus station. The guy he beat up was actually talking to someone else on a Bluetooth headset. About 10 years ago, I was unemployed and went to one of those employment centers looking for a job for the first time in a long time, which ended up basically being some sort of internet cafe where you use the computers to job search, create resumes, and other stuff. I sat down by an older gentleman who just stared into the screen with his hands in his lap. An employee came by and asked him if he needed help, to which he agreed and stated he had been incarcerated for about 30 years and had never used a computer. She sat down and told him to use the mouse to move the cursor to an icon, etc., etc. This dude gave the mouse a sharp jab with his finger like he was pushing an elevator button. That slid the mouse across the mousepad and onto the table. The look on the lady's face was priceless when she realized she had to teach this guy how to use a computer from ground fricking zero. She was puzzled where to even begin. My dad is a prison chaplain. One of his inmates had been in for about 30 years and got out last year. My dad got a call from him a few days later. "Chap, did you know they have toilets that flush themselves?" My mother just got released after a 15-year prison sentence. The weirdest thing to her is the cell phones. She thinks it's crazy that everyone is attached at the hip to their phones, and that you can look up anything in an instant. Also, gas prices. They definitely threw her for a loop. She offered to gas my vehicle up because I helped her run some errands. She didn't realize it was going to cost $50. She also thinks it's wild that my brothers and I can play games together and not be in the same house. The first time she called in and I told her I was playing Destiny 2 with my brothers, she thought they were actually in the living room with me. It still freaks her out that we live in different states and can play together. That one was posted in 2015 and is likely a result of equal parts the time locked away and the classic parents are confused by technology issue. Online games were still kind of a thing in the 90s and noughties. I was told this story by an ex-felon who had a cellmate that finally got released after 30-plus years in prison. He gave the guy his phone number because he knew that transitioning into the real world would be rough. He went on to say that he got a call from his cellmate at a grocery store in a corner, crying because the selection in the store was too much for him to handle. Mostly the different varieties of items, different brands have grown in the past 30-plus years. Also, the use of self-checkout machines can be confusing. I learned about this in Business 101 in college, that if you overwhelm your customer with too many options, it leads to lower sales. Sometimes that happens to me in a grocery store. Too many options, so I buy nothing. Like having a library of hundreds of Steam games, and after an hour of deciding and playing the first 5 minutes of a few, you play nothing and go back to Reddit. Saw a dude on the news who'd been in jail for like 50 or 60 years. He said the craziest thing was seeing all the crazy colored Gatorades. That, and he thought everyone was an FBI agent because of their earbuds. I remember working at McDonald's and having an ex-convict come in and being outraged at the prices. A Big Mac was twice the price he was used to. Not a felon, but I did have a lengthy phone call with an ex-con at work once where I went in circles trying to explain the concept of attachments to emails. I also had to explain that fax and email were separate things. What's she in for? You know how your mother always said, "I brought you into this world, I can take you out of it too"? Well, his mum tried it. Was at the corner store and some guy walks in with his buddy who was acting a little weird. He points to some Red Bull and asks, "What are those?" His buddy tells him, "They get you jacked, like amped up, get you going." His buddy left with like 5 of them. I'm assuming he just got out of lockup. It gave me a chuckle. I work with a lot of felons. One of them had been in prison for 38 years. He said everything is different. The cars are so different and quiet. Everyone is on their phones, and phones are weird. People have phones in their pockets. Vehicles definitely were a lot noisier in the older days, and street scenes were a bigger assault on your ears. I remember it from the early to mid-90s, and I've also seen archive footage from the 60s and 70s where it's slightly worse. 38 years presumably also means that he went from having never used a credit or debit card to a world where a lot of people don't carry cash and buy things online. I feel like long-term prison is actually a form of time travel. I went to rehab a few years ago, and one of the guys there with me just got out of prison after a 20-year sentence for being a huge crystal dealer. He said cell phones blew his mind, and he's so confused about gas pumps now because of the option to pay with cards at the pump and how different they look. Just wait until he sees one with a frickin' TV in it. I knew a guy who was in for around 15 years. I told him I like video games, and he was asking if I had a chance to play this or that game on PS2. I said I didn't, and he said I should get it. They weren't classics or anything, but sports games that came out at the time. In 2015, I met a guy who went into jail in 1997 and had just got out. The big thing he noticed was that there weren't many large groups of youth out and about like when he was a kid. He said the saddest thing he saw was going to the local park and seeing almost nobody there at 6 p.m. When he went in the 1990s, there were typically around 50 to 60 young people hanging out, skating around and socializing. He said people weren't out on their stoops socializing as much. He doesn't see nearly as many people out and about on Friday and Saturday nights. I suppose the way we socialize has changed so much since then. Back then, the only way you could socialize was by leaving your house and hanging out with your friends. Even doing nothing with friends was preferable to just hanging out inside. Today, people don't do that as much. This is also the biggest thing for me. Youth used to be absolutely everywhere and aren't really out as much. The thing you said about parks and stoops is so true. Parks used to be always filled with large groups of young people aged 16 to 28. And now they're all empty or near empty. I don't know the reason why they aren't out, but youth culture in general just doesn't seem to be there the way it was in the 1990s. A reason is probably because parents nowadays don't want their kids running around at night, especially in winter. They don't want their children out late and without a parent watching them. Whenever I used to go to the park, it would always be before tea or it would be a lunch event with friends. Now, a lot of people will hang out with friends at shopping centers or at home because there's more stuff to do there. We have our consoles, which can have up to 4 players, but usually there'll be more people, so people will swap after a match. Haha, not even close to as long, but I was in jail before, during, and after the 2016 election, and it was weird to see people slowly finding out that Trump had become president. The police didn't tell anyone who had won, and we had to wait for all the new inmates to come in. Most people thought they were lying when they said Trump won, especially people who had been in since before Obama. I was in for 3 days back in '99. Last meal before I went in, McRib. I got out and the McRib was gone. I went for 2 months. When I went in, everyone was playing PS3. Got mine stolen, and when I got out, everyone was playing PS4, and I had neither. Can you imagine trying to understand memes? That's a long ride, man. The problem is that now they're just one inside joke inside of another inside joke inside of another inside joke. If you weren't there from the beginning, it's hopeless. I keep picturing the scene from Shawshank Redemption where Brooks is released from prison after decades of incarceration. The world has changed so much that he's overwhelmed and doesn't last long on the outside. I can't imagine how hard it must be to acclimatize if you don't have good support. That scene was so sad. If I remember the quote correctly, didn't he say he was in there for 50 years, released in 1955, and going into prison in 1905? Coming out after 2 world wars, television, radio, cars, and everything. That is an incredibly sad part of that movie. I don't know if more has changed for an inmate coming out who was incarcerated in the 90s, but the way we operate in society may have changed more, if anything, just by the influence of smartphones. Something about old guys looking at the world passing them by messes me up more than anything. I remember going down with my pops to get some ice cream a while back, and he just asked for a cone, and they asked him what kind he wanted, and he said he didn't know, so they just started listing off the whatever 40 flavors they had. And he just had this tragic, confused look on his face, and I remember leaving with him, and he said to me, "I don't even understand ice cream anymore." That crap makes me sad for some reason. Life is fleeting. Time goes by so quickly. I'm 40 now. That number messed with me for a while when I hit my birthday in January. 20 doesn't seem that far away. What messes with me now is music. There are no more decades to me. 80s, 90s, 2000s, sure. Everything after that is a mishmash of stuff. Man, I just turned 40 2 months ago. I feel you. For me, it's technology. I was always on the cutting edge. I ran a BBS from middle school all through the 90s, was into the pirate underground scene, was always building PCs and overclocking, and became a software dev and knew everything cool on the internet. Now it's all Snapchat and Instagram on phones, and the apps are so poorly designed and hard to navigate. Not to mention, so many of them harvest your metadata and user info, so it's downright scary to install any app. And new tech comes out so quickly I don't even care about it anymore. It feels bad, man. A friend of my dad's just got released a while back. He was in for about 8 years, and the other day he was talking to my dad about how vaping is so healthy for you, and he has individual ringtones for each of his contacts. He's hilarious, but we don't mention anything about how behind he is. It's not as extreme an amount of time as others, but you can still tell he's adapting. Wait, is it weird to have individual ringtones for people? Well, I'm an old young person, apparently. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work in prison. I recall a lifer going out for the day and being mind-blown by ATMs and the moving conveyor belts at the supermarkets. Yeah, they probably don't know what Reddit is. To be fair, I don't exactly know what Reddit is either. No one can be told what Reddit is, you have to see it for yourself. My best friend just got out in January after 12 years. He can't handle the awesomeness of Netflix, also booking stuff online. I'm still teaching him Amazon. Oh, and you pick your seat at the movie theater. I'm not really over that yet either. He loves that YouTube now has a video for everything. You want to fix your golf swing? There's a video. Want to properly cut up a papaya or tie a certain kind of fly fishing lure? There's a video. Obviously, smartphones and whatnot have been a big difference, but the big difference to me is simply that I rarely see kids outside. Anyone who remembers the 80s and 90s remembers that past 5 p.m. there were groups of youth aging 16 to 28 literally roaming everywhere. I mean, just huge groups of youth standing around at corners, drinking and smoking. The parks were filled with them doing substances and whatnot, and after 9 p.m., blocks were basically overrun with youths. Parties were everywhere. Even the losers had zero trouble finding some crazy party to go to. I've been out for a while and I traveled all over the States. The one universal change I will say is that I rarely see that kind of youth culture anywhere anymore. I'm not sure if there are just 3/4 less kids or if the kids are just all inside now. Youth culture used to be in your face constantly. People used to stand on the street corners with boom boxes and have breakdance competitions, with plenty of substances passed around. I haven't seen anything remotely similar to that. Another thing is crime. Crime used to be everywhere. Even normal, well-to-do people knew about and were often even slightly engaged in some form of crime. They often had siblings that were into crime, or they knew neighbors who were into it. If you ever wanted anything extra done that was illegal, there was always guys you could go to. There was your normal life, then there was your sort of underground life. Almost everyone had one or knew plenty of people that were into it. I remember as a youth, me and my friends used to sell Lucy cigarettes and transport stolen goods from store to store for this seedy Italian guy on our block. In my early 20s, we used to help find guys to pay off landlords to let us throw parties on their rooftops. Everyone did this sort of stuff. That was considered kind of normal youth stuff back then. Today, that would seem like something only a serious criminal would do. Even our parents had their dealings with shady characters. Those are really the two biggest changes I've noticed anyway. The looks people give you when you say, "I only have cash." Not me, but a friend's older brother was in prison for 8 years from 2003 to 2011. He was most shocked about how movies had changed and how much detail they had now. Also, was shocked about computers. I met a guy who'd been in since the 90s and he kinda dressed and styled like Vanilla Ice when he got out. I think his dad still had all his clothes. I only served a couple of months back in 2015. I was released alongside a man who was in between 20 to 25 years. I forget exactly, but it was a lot. All of the people in my program were in great spirits after only being in for a couple of months. We had our girlfriends picking us up, talking about our plans, just bullcrapping around. This guy looked scared. As I wanted to leave every single one of my possessions behind, this guy had everything with him. A TV that still has the RCA connection, a CD player, all his clothes, some food, and a couple of shoes. He knew he was in for a shock. I have an employee who served 11 years. Coming back to real life is hard for these dudes. He won't go into a convenience store if it's too crowded. He can't handle himself around proper people because he's too desocialized. Oof. Not to devalue this man's clear trauma, but I know at least a few people who feel like that generally, especially post-pandemic. If a prison can turn a regular, functional person to that level of anxiety, you've got to feel sorry for them. My brother is in now, incarcerated in November 2017, and won't get out until 2031 unless a miracle happens. I can't imagine what kind of world he'll be rejoining. I wish there was a feature on Reddit to bring me back to this thread once there were some more answers in a few years. It sounds like a good topic. What happened to Legos? I'm not saying it's bad, I just want to know what happened. Legos lost their patent, leading to the Lego apocalypse, and so to be able to compete with the new companies, they started focusing on more themed kits, making it easy for them to latch on to whatever was popular at the time. I miss when you could just go buy a big box of mixed bricks. My best friend was in jail for a considerable amount of time. He didn't know how to use the new touchscreen washing machines, iPhone, or even the dishwasher. Also, wireless headphones blew his mind. Had to teach him how to call and message people and use apps. He's addicted to social media now, haha. Family member got released after about 5 years. He said the most surprising thing is all the radio stations still play the same music, like only 1/3 of it is new to him. He wasn't in for that long, but it still shines a light on the music industry and radio. A guy I knew who went in the 90s always used to say the biggest difference is white women all of a sudden got big butts. How much shish kebabs have changed? We had some shish kebabs, then we started calling them kebabs. Now it's just babs, so it went from shish kebab to kebab to bab. I wasn't in prison, but enlisted in the military in early 2009 and did most of my training here in the States for that year. So I wasn't completely out of the loop, but after finishing boot camp and training for my job in 2009, I was stationed overseas for 2 years. Upon arrival to my new duty station, I got an iPhone 3GS, but I quickly lost it within a month, and never bothered getting another one. On base, the internet was practically 56K modem speeds, for whatever reason. I think it was due to insufficient infrastructures to provide service to so many people. So my internet usage was limited because of slow speeds and limited free time at work. I remembered Christmas and New Year of 2010, Command didn't approve leave for us to go home, so that we would be ready to deploy if necessary. Everyone ended up getting all boozed up at the barracks, and I mostly spent my time playing PS3 offline because of aforementioned crappy internet. So basically, from 2009 through 2011, during the rise of online video streaming services and smartphones, I missed out on all of that. It wasn't prison or anything, so I was aware, but didn't experience any of it firsthand. Coming back to the States the beginning of 2012 was like traveling a couple of years into the future. Netflix used to arrive by mail, but all of a sudden, the fact that I could access any show I wanted from a single website blew my mind. In the span of the 2 or 3 years, internet speeds increased exponentially for the same cost. It didn't help that I spent the whole time with archaic internet while on base. In 2009, I had a PlayStation Portable for gaming and had to lug around multiple UMDs. Now I can just go to the App Store and download from a plethora of mobile apps on my smartphone, all at 4G speeds. So while it wasn't nearly as drastic as being in prison from the early 2000s until 2018, even those couple of years in the early 2010s where I was away were pretty crazy when I returned. I can only imagine what it'd be like for anyone locked away for 5, 10, or 20 or more years. I bet they wonder why, before they entered prison, people used to say that they graduated from college, and now that they just say graduated college, that would be an unsettling shift. My uncle was incarcerated in '85. Several years ago, we went for a visit and took snacks. The plastic grocery bag blew his mind. My mum was locked up for 10 years starting in the early 2000s. The first time I paused live TV, she lost her frickin' mind. I was actually friends with a guy who was on death row for 20 years. He said it was the cell phones. Who sits for 20 years? And how does he tell you? And where is he now? How does he know about cells? It's actually not unusual at all. The problem is with the death penalty is if you make a mistake and convict an innocent, you've irrevocably screwed up. So those on death row get a lot of appeals. Capital punishment is extremely costly because of the court fees, more costly than not having the death penalty in fact. Not only that, but innocent people occasionally are executed despite the checks in place. I was in prison from 2003 until 2011. Wasn't really surprised by much of anything. Inside, we watched television every day, and the commercials prepared me for the technology. I had the New York Times delivered to my cell or cube daily. We had radios, news, BBC, NPR, etc. Smartphones really weren't that difficult to grasp. I came of age during the early internet era, so smartphones were just mini computers with touchscreens. If anything, technology was more user-friendly than it had been before I went away. You see, it's not the technology that's difficult to adapt to, it's the people. There's a prison culture, and once you adapt to it, you learn to respect and even appreciate it. You see the same people every day, and it's a tense, testosterone-driven environment. Negotiating the unspoken rules means understanding the importance of showing respect without showing fear, and the only way to do that honestly is to get in touch with yourself, to overcome your insecurities, to quiet your righteous anger, to develop a sense of when it's time to move out of the way and when it's time to stand your ground. The culture forces you to become a man among men. Coming home to a society of selfish, arrogant, disrespectful, self-assured adult children who glorify their minor struggles on social media and perpetuate this culture of self-identified victimization was, and continues to be, difficult. In prison, not only will you not be celebrated for your so-called courage in aggrandizing your victimization, you'll be mocked for not handling the problem like a man. Out here, it seems almost a contest as to who can cry the loudest and blame the most. In my personal life, the same people crying wolf and routinely shifting blame are the ones who dismiss me as a human being because of my prison experience. Ironically, my prison experience is the same reason I dismiss them, and so I feel a chasm has grown between the man I became in prison and the culture I came home to as a 32-year-old adult. And every time I sense someone of relevance in my life dismiss my opinion, subtly condescend to me, gossip about me just out of earshot, etc., I feel that chasm grow. How have your real-life love triangles played out? None of us ended up with any of us, and a whole new set of friends had to be found. Had a thing with a guy, he proceeds to kiss best friend. I forgive them both, they proceed to make out in secret, and got to the point where he asked her to go to bed with him. They cracked and told me again. This had not been the first time something like this had happened with my friend. Needless to say, he no longer had a love interest after that, and I lost a crappy friend, which I guess is a win in the end. I've never understood the whole go after a friend's significant other thing. I once had a former boyfriend's roommate hit on me after we'd broken up, and even that felt weird and off-putting. Oh, I've got one. Dated a guy, really liked him. Maybe was reaching love levels. He then cheats on and dumps me for another girl. Great. Literally the next week, his best friend, who was not at all my type, was messaging me and was reassuring me that my ex told him he would be perfect for me and encouraged him to try to date me. I cut them both out of my life so fast. I had a friend in high school who'd always try to hit on or steal my significant others, even if she didn't like them at all. She just didn't want me getting all the attention. She even did it with new friends. Had a best friend since college who was always hawking on my boyfriends. Then I decided to switch things up and date a woman. She flirted with her too. Then I realized it wasn't just about competing. There was some strange thing she had for me, or against me. I could never figure it out. Anyway, we're not friends anymore, but we are cordial when we see each other. The female competition thing really bums me out. 3 of my friends and I all liked the same girl. They would hit on her. I instead befriended her older and very protective brother. I got the girl. Did he befriend the brother solely to win the girl? No, he's actually a super interesting guy in his own right. A very successful entrepreneur who has worked in the most dangerous countries on Earth, doing absolutely insane crap, i.e. selling helicopters in Brazil or protecting coal ships from pirates. What the frick is that dude's job title? Ron Swanson. Color me pleasantly surprised that he genuinely befriended the guy to be a pal, and not just to use him in a sort of male-dominated medieval family dynamic to get approval to court his sister. I worked offshore. I knew I was going to be gone for a few months. Girlfriend said she wanted to wait since I was such a great guy. I came back and she was the same number of months pregnant that I had been gone. We'd always used protection, so I was skeptical but supportive. She had the kid and it was a different race than either of us. She admitted that while I'd been gone, she had had another boyfriend, then added that she was still seeing him. Acted like it was completely normal, as if it would have been crazy for her to stay alone like she'd offered to. DNA test? Not mine. Nope, the F out. Other guy goes to prison a few months later. Rumor mill says he was a mean-tempered and bullying spouse. She stalked me for decades, called my parents to find me, called my grandparents to find me. I'd see her around town and she would start following me and begging me to give her another chance. I eventually moved 700 miles away. She still calls, unlisted numbers to this day because of her. She gets the number from family or friends. Last I heard, she has 3 kids with 3 dads, never had a job, 2 of the dads in prison. I'm her one that got away. In some ways, I do feel sad for her. She's had a rough life. According to her, I was the only guy who treated her well. If she'd reciprocated, who knows? Our romance was in 1996. I got a message from her on Facebook last month. I didn't reply. Man, if she'd applied half of that drive and persistence into developing stable relationships with a good guy that returned her interest, she'd have a great life right now. Well, I mean, technically she's trying to do that. My dude dodged a tsunami with that girl. Was dating a guy, he confessed to one of his best friends that he liked her. She rejected him. Was mad because I was second choice, but forgave because frick my life. He still likes her and she messes with him. They fight because she doesn't want me around. They become friends again, I dump him. He admits to never loving me and was in it for the act of a relationship. Now he's all over her and she still plays him. I'm here sad because I loved him. Rest in peace, me. I hope you feel better. I know exactly how it feels to be used. I always wonder what people are thinking when they pull this crap. It will get better, I promise you. Keep on keeping on, friend. Was being manipulated by a guy 7 years older than me. He was gaslighting me and stringing me along. His girlfriend and baby mama knew about me, but stayed with him and blamed me for everything. I eventually cut him off and they got married. She messaged me on Facebook about a year ago, asking if we'd slept together while they were married. I hadn't, and she apologized for putting everything on me. It was unfair for her to do because I was so young, 19 when it started, and he was manipulating me and taking advantage of how naive I was. She explained that she had kicked him out and was beginning divorce proceedings because I wasn't the only one he cheated on her with. And he continued to cheat on her after they were married, including with her next-door neighbor. We ended up talking and laughing over what a scumbag loser he is, and laughing over the fact that we fell for his crap. I recently messaged her to ask how the divorce turned out. It's over, she came out on top, and me and her are friendly now. I was in college and I really liked this college guy in one of my classes. We instantly hit it off and became great friends. I really liked him. I was head over heels and he knew it. He was still hung up on his ex-girlfriend, but we fooled around from time to time. A guy from my high school kept asking me out and I kept turning him down. He wasn't my type, but we remained friends. All of my friends were telling me to give high school guy a chance, but I wanted college guy. I got super sick and texted college guy asking if he could take me to the hospital. He never replied, but I know he read it. So I texted high school guy and he was at my apartment in 10 minutes and even offered to pay my copay because I was flat broke at the time. I did pay him back. After that happened, college guy wouldn't talk to me for a while and like an idiot I kept going after him. I was super heartbroken. High school guy helped me through it. Finally, I decided to give him a shot. Now we're married and about to celebrate our 7-year anniversary with our 3-year-old son. When you say he wasn't your type, what specifically do you mean by that? Seems like he was your type after all. Not the original writer, but I do have a similar story of giving the other guy a chance and it working out. Me and the significant other are going on 5 years. My significant other was not my type. At the time. I figured it out once I started dating him and that what I thought was my type wasn't really my type. Don't knock it until you try it sort of thing. Hey, at least the high school guy's patience paid off. What a truly nice gentleman. All 3 of us now hate each other with the fury of 1,000 suns and wouldn't particularly care if the other 2 died of Lou Gehrig's disease. So not too bad, all things considered. I included the simple summary of a love triangle just because it seems like a concise summary of how the majority of these things have to play out. This is a story of a love square versus a love triangle, but it's pretty crazy. I had been living together with my girlfriend for maybe 6 months, together for maybe a year. She cheated pretty bad, but I don't know the depths of it. But at least 2 guys. She would tell me how much she loves me every 30 seconds, which made me believe that she was loyal. She didn't discuss other men, not as friends or anything, all silence. I'm not the jealous type at all, so I normally just trust and assume it's all good until it isn't. Nobody got caught, she just secretly planned to move in with one of the guys and surprise moved out one day. Not such a great feeling coming into an empty home. Took years to even learn of what transpired. She'd had a tough childhood and always told people the gruesome story of her mum dying at the hands of her father, with specifically her mum's eye dangling from the socket. Fast forward 1.5 years and I'm living with a new girlfriend and I share the eye dangling story and a light bulb goes off in her head. We piece together what happened. When I was living with cheating girlfriend, we had some drama. She had broken up with me, got with a guy, then came back to me, in addition to other trust-eroding issues, so I was basically not interested in doing the deed with her due to a lack of trust. Cheating girlfriend apparently was sleeping with the boyfriend of what would be my girlfriend in 1.5 years. Boyfriend of future girlfriend says, "Oh hey, I know this girl, she's had a tough life," and tells the whole mum dying story with specifically the dangling eye, which is how we figured it out, and goes on, "She needs a place to stay, can she stay with us?" She's worried her roommate is going to commit the unspeakable act against her. My future girlfriend calls him out that he's cheating with her, since he has a history of cheating and he admits it, so obviously she did not stay with them. Honestly, the cheating I don't mind as much as calling me a roommate and the potential unspeakable act committer when I thought I was in love with this girl, claiming to be my girlfriend and wanting to settle down with me. In conclusion, my girlfriend at the time had an ex-boyfriend that cheated on her with the girl I was seeing who cheated on me. Also, before I'd met my girlfriend at the time, apparently I'd had a dalliance with her childhood best friend. Had no idea. I didn't actually do anything wrong since that predated our relationship, but I still feel like a jerk about it between those two sordid bits of history. My bedroom life included maybe 5 people in a period of 2 years, and 3 of them are all intertwined like this. It's crazy. Kinda related, but my Aunt Janet was cheated on by my Uncle John with a girl Kate. Kate was cheating with John on her husband Brandon. Now Kate and John are getting married, and Janet and Brandon are getting married. Basically, they switched partners. All fake names, of course. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was on a work contract on location. I met a guy, started dating, and things were good. One day, he told me his ex was going to be in town for a day and that they were going to hang out. That night, we were supposed to meet for drinks at the pub, and he was super distant and acting strange. It was obvious to me that he'd hooked up with her. He ended up leaving early to go to bed, alone. I was teed off. There was another guy also working for the company who'd always flirted with me. I happened to literally run into him as I'm headed outside to the balcony. Maybe it was something I was giving off, but he grabbed me and kissed me, and I went with it, and we ended up hooking up that night on the balcony, which also happened to be the place me and the first guy hooked up the first time. The next day, Guy 1 confesses that he hooked up with his ex. I told him I could tell and kind of left it at that. We just started hanging out less, and I started seeing a lot more of Guy 2. One day, it was quite apparent that they both weren't talking to me. They had talked. I rode up the elevator with one of their co-workers one day who told me that they were both upset that I'd hooked up with both of them in the same location, which frankly, I still think is silly. They ended up making friends, but I was out of the picture. Last week of my contract rolls around, and one particular party night, Guy 1 is giving me a lot of attention. Guy 2 also sees this going on. I end up leaving with Guy 1. At my place, the phone rings, and it's Guy 2, and he asks to speak to Guy 1. They're both from the same country, so they end up having some long drawn-out conversation that I don't understand. 10 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. It's Guy 2. He asks to come in. I let him, and they both proceed to start kissing me and removing my clothes. That was a good night. Not so much a love triangle as a love V, but here's how it went. I liked this girl had a boyfriend, but was bi-curious and into me. She asked her boyfriend if experimenting with me was okay. He said it was okay so long as he was involved too. Me being 21 and having a bad case of the feelings, I agreed to this. It lasted maybe a month and it was really awkward. It ended up with me breaking up with them, but those two staying together. After that, I decided I'm not into guys at all and I would rather not repeat that experience. I don't talk to that pair much anymore, but I think they're married now. Yeah, I think most of the love triangles in my life that I've run into could be described as love Vs, i.e. one sad loser on the side has a crush on one of the parties. Luckily, there are a couple of true love triangles to help us fulfill the question in this video's heading. A few years back, I had hernia surgery and was on bed rest for a few days. One night, out of nowhere, an old fling hit me up telling me she was in the neighborhood. I was ecstatic at hearing her voice because she was one of the most beautiful, intelligent, and successful people I knew, and I always admired her. She ended up coming over and taking care of me, and we hit it off way better than before. I didn't know it at the time, but she was dating this guy since forever and was even living with him. When I found out, I told her I was going to be seeing other people too. We still ended up seeing each other for a few months, and eventually she had to tell him that she had cheated on him with me. He wanted her to stay even after we spent a weekend at my cabin. She stayed with the other guy because he was a safe option and she needed a place to stay. I couldn't promise her anything because I felt like I couldn't trust her and she didn't like the fact that I was dating other people. In reality, we were in a relationship and I saw other people as a way to not think about her living with her boyfriend. The whole thing was a crappy situation because we were madly in love with each other, but because of our trust issues, we ended up breaking it off. I ended up in a relationship with someone else for like a month. We never really talked since then. She married that guy a few months after I married my wife. She still calls at night from time to time, but I never answer because I'm happily married and I don't need that kind of trouble in my life. Don't want to be intrusive, but no other way to ask. Does your wife know? How does she feel about this? No, I never really considered it worth mentioning. Prefer to let sleeping dogs lie. Ha, wise move. Was a few years ago, and I'm currently still with one of them. My ex-boyfriend was manipulative and an emotional bully, not to mention pushed me into physical things that I didn't want to do. His influence caused me to begin working at Olive Garden while during my sophomore year at college, which led to the entrance of my current significant other. My ex was cheating with multiple girls via text over a period of months. Each time I confronted him resulted in a tearful plea of, "I'll change, I love you so much, I can't bear hurting you," after it occurred. After half a year of this, I'd virtually numbed myself to his pleas, but was too afraid of what I'd lost, my virginity, to give up the relationship. Instead, I acted as his transportation since his parents were unreliable and he was trying to finish his high school diploma. He was 1.5 years younger than me, so at Olive Garden, I never expected to find anyone else because of the restaurant environment and was not actually looking for anyone else. My ex also joined working there after quitting a nearby restaurant. He was absolutely crap at his job as a host, often infuriating the managers with his stupidity and lack of common sense. Eventually, I noticed another guy who I called a better and more mature version of the ex, but I was not planning on leaving at that time. My current significant other was sarcastic, aloof from everyone else, and mysterious, which of course attracted me, but I still had some attachment to the ex because I was fiercely loyal to a fault. I regret how I handled the falling out and transition to my current significant other because I did not cut off the ex like most people would have, and how I know I should have. Slowly, I developed an admiration for my SO and felt butterflies in my stomach whenever he was near. It was not a linear upward progression in our initial stages of relationship because even though he hated my ex, he respected the boundaries of a relationship. This changed, however, when he began to realize I was interested in him, and he felt as though he might rescue me from this jerk. I too looked at him as a rescuer. The ex began to notice his attention in me and that his presence was often near me, causing him to purposefully be a butt by leaving dirty dishes on my significant other's table, making inflammatory comments to him, and entering the area whenever he saw SO and I near each other. This became a sort of tango around the restaurant. I knew the ex became agitated by seeing me near my SO, so I would increasingly be around him and then disappear when the ex came into the area. I would still drive him places, but when he prompted me to confirm he and I were in a relationship, I would deflect and never answer straightly. One lonely night, I was texting my SO and he invited me to his apartment to watch a Quentin Tarantino movie. I gladly went and watched the movie with him, but nothing else happened because he was not the type to push, and I had been extremely damaged by the ex's advances to the point where I would later tremble just laying in the same bed as my SO, as a result of my ex. Our texting grew more frequent while I became more dismissive and numb toward the ex. I feared for my SO's safety because my ex is genuinely psychopathic and seemed to blame him for taking me away from him. One night driving my ex home, I knew I had to end it. He was sobbing and wanted me to hold him, but I couldn't stand touching him as I knew it was over. I had to carefully word my sentences so that he would finally leave my damn car. Then one night I found out the ex was stalking my SO. He had followed him to the apartment, which scared me to death knowing he was immature and prone to reactivity. Shortly after, as I left the SO's apartment to go home and had stopped off at a Wendy's drive-thru, my ex pulled up in his truck next to me and rolled down the window, grinning. He then pulled out a military-style knife and informed me it was just in case something happened. This was too close to comfort for me, so I texted his father to let him know what his son had done, causing the ex to be infuriated with me. However, I knew his father would not let that situation happen again. Since then, I've received lovelorn letters about how much I was still thought of, and that even when we are old and grey, he'll still love me. He attempted quite recently to make a friendship pact with my SO to have limited access to me, which he rationally declined. It's been a month since the ex last sent a message over social media that he was moving on and wished me the best. However, I intrinsically know this claim to be false and expect the day when he makes contact again. I don't think I'll ever be rid of him, honestly, unless he falls deeply in love with someone else to where the obsession falls on her. My conclusion of being in a love triangle for a short time was that I was confused, hurt, lonely, and looking for someone to rescue me. But I regret that it happened in a way where I could label it as a love triangle because it was unfair to both parties. I won't deny it's exciting to have two people dance with each other for your affections, but it isn't by any means healthy and at least one of the people will be hurt. After me basically being a butthole for a bit and stringing them both along while I tried to make up my mind, I stopped dating both of them and stayed single for about a year to get my crap together. I think generally if you're caught in a love triangle and don't know who to choose, that's a sign that neither of them is right for you. That is strangely down to earth for a person who was evidently involved in a situation that sounds like it was pretty unhealthy for a while. Good on you for changing, and I hope you keep it up. Married a gay guy. We were non-monogamous, I got really close to a friend with benefits, and now we're a 3. Took a hot mess and nearly 2 years of drama, but we are a functioning poly-triad. We definitely had our moments, but we're still here now, so we do live together and usually share a bed. They can both be complete punks about space and covers, and only one of us actually likes sleeping in the middle, so I occasionally take a break for a night or two. We're not actually non-monogamous, read open. Obviously, I do the deed with more than one person, 2 in fact, but that's just mostly been a crap ton of life stuff going on, including a big move, so that side of our lives has just been sort of on hold. Mine was like some kind of freak love square. Two guys wanted to date me, and I wanted to date a guy who didn't give a crap about me unless it involved dancing. I gave up on chasing the dancer. I dated one of the guys who originally wanted to date me. It ended badly. I decided to date the other guy who seemed interested. We got married and are expecting a baby now. We were pretty good friends. She wasn't sure if she was into girls and wanted to experiment with someone she trusted. He and I had been dating on and off for 3 years, together for a full year at the time. We'd had a couple of three-ways, and after a couple of drunken kisses between me and her, we suggested she join us. We worked well together for 6 months, dating each other equally. I was 3 years older than her, and people said we looked alike. Then she got a haircut and a dye job, and she suddenly looked like my little sister. It was not something I was into at all. But he was, and she was. And I pulled back a little, and then it was me versus her, and he chose her. And then dumped her because he wanted her little sister. Her actual flesh and blood little sister. In conclusion, he chose her, she was the younger one, he left her because he was into her little sister. It made me less bitter. He asked her to marry him at my birthday dinner. She said yes, I got drunk, he drove me home. Our D&D group survived the event, and I was a bridesmaid. That's a crap move on his part. I'd been with my ex for 2 years, treated her like the princess that she wanted to be, gave her unconditional trust, which I have now learned was a mistake. She had terrible social skills, so I encouraged her to make guy friends as she doesn't have any. Tried to get her back in contact with one of her long-lost friends from teenage years and encouraged them to spend time together, and I even spent time and got to know the guy to show my girl I have her interests in mind. She ends up doing the deed with him and telling me that they share a pure form of love, something she never had for me. Cried, been depressed, and felt like a worthless piece of crap because no matter what I did, it seems like I don't deserve to be loved. Forgave her, tried to win her back, and gave her patience and time while hiding how much this is killing me inside because she feels guilty to see me like this. End up figuring out she was just a spoiled, selfish brat because she will not stop lying to me and kept seeing him, and he is a manipulative and controlling substance addict, and they both never had a real relationship and told me that they developed true love within a couple of weeks of doing the deed with each other. It still hurts me like heck to think about this, but I really did everything that I could. It didn't end up good for me, fricked me up mentally as I have depression, 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Older generations. Who are the "I don't use computers" people of your time? My grandparents are very old-fashioned even for their generation, if it counts. My grandfather worked as a grocery manager for years. He finally quit when his small mum-and-pup store buckled down on bar scans and electronic cash registers. He was convinced that barcodes were going to be the mark of the beast from Revelations, and that if people use computers to access adult content, then all computerized items must be banned. So there's that. When remote-control TVs came out, I suggested that my father buy one, and he said, "It will be a cold day in hell when I'm too lazy to tell one of you boys to get up and change the channel for me." It was such an amazing sentence that I committed it to memory, and I still remember it word for word 50 years later. From his point of view, he already had a remote-control TV. Why should he pay extra to have it automated? Exactly. He would have had us act out Game of Thrones before getting a subscription to HBO. My mom was just telling me about when answering machines were new and how people were so fearful of them and refused to leave a message. She got promoted at a job because she didn't mind calling clients and leaving messages. I bought my grandmother an answering machine in 2005. She refused to get one before that, despite several of her children begging her to invest in one. I got her a $10 one from Walmart. I told her that I'd set it up for her, and she asked me where it was. She was under the impression that answering machines were about the size of a toaster oven. After some questions, I also learned that she objected to getting one for so long because she was concerned about how much counter space she thought it would take up. But she also used the same bathwater for a week at the time and kept her hearing aid batteries, all of them, not just the ones she wasn't currently using, in the freezer so they would last longer. So who knows? Some of the older alkaline batteries would slowly discharge over time. You could slow them down by storing the ones you weren't using in the freezer. It didn't make them last a lot longer, but it did give a slightly longer shelf life. However, my grandmother would keep all of her batteries in the freezer and not have any batteries in her hearing aids at all. As you can guess, that didn't improve her hearing, no matter how long the batteries were lasting in the freezer. I mean, I might be wrong. That sounds like it might stray from being technologically illiterate and just not caring that much about functioning in life in general. The battery freezer thing might be an incredible case of being a cheapskate. Some still had outdoor toilets and were laughing at those who'd installed them inside because they're crapping in their own houses? I lived on a homestead a little while. I had an outdoor pit privy toilet. I hand-carved the toilet seat myself. Sometimes I miss watching the sunset while taking a dump. It was way better than being stuck in a small room reading Reddit on my phone. Unless it was raining. Wiping while holding an umbrella is trickier than it looks. When I was a kid, late 50s and early 60s, seatbelts in the cars were an option. Lots of people thought they were unnecessary and refused to pay extra for them. Heaters and windshield defoggers were likewise optional. My parents bought a new 1964 Plymouth Valiant and didn't get the option. I think all it takes is one snowfall in the winter when you're struggling with a windshield that constantly fogs up and frosts over. Absolute misery pulling over and scraping the inside of your windshield. My dad once told me a story about his grandmother refusing to fly in planes because she didn't want to get her hair all messed up from the wind. I'm picturing her flying with Red Baron Snoopy as the pilot. "Honey, I promise your hair won't get messed up from the wind." Plops leather bomber hat on her head. My 89-year-old mum pays for cable but insists on watching only PBS and occasionally NBC, CBS or ABC. The other channels are too much technology to find on the remote. She also buys multiple boxes or cans of food, dates them in Sharpie marker, records the price, less coupon or sale special, and has a rack for all her finds. She will never eat all the oatmeal or beans in our collective lifetimes. But she was a Depression-era child, so I get why the urge to stock up on food is strong. My grandmother is 89. When she was a kid, she had an uncle who hated cars. He called them machines and refused to drive one. It could have been job security though, her whole family worked for the railroad. In all fairness, cars are machines. Then again, so are trains. Fun fact, the Russian word for car is machina. My dad is 65. He remembers old folks complaining about the forward pass in football. But it did completely change the game. My grandaunt still believes that 15 is the age of adulthood, that schooling isn't necessary beyond that point. She grew up in a time when literacy wasn't a given. With a bachelor's degree and a very mediocre Spanish, I would have killed it in 1920. For all of about 8 years. Well, now I'm greatly depressed. My grandmother drinks only hot decaf coffee. Breakfast, hot decaf coffee. Dinner, hot decaf coffee. Feeling parched after a day of hard work? Hot decaf coffee. 100-degree July day with lung-clogging humidity? Hot decaf coffee. When I was growing up, we never had ice. That was a luxury. Cold drinks aren't good for your stomach. My parents are from former Soviet country and also refuse to drink anything cold, saying it'll make you sick. My dad doesn't even drink beer cold. Room temperature at most. Any beer-drinking alcoholic will tell you you can drink a lot more beers if your beers are room temperature instead of cold. This is actually a very common thing in Asia. In China, they only drink hot water. According to Chinese medicine, cold water, and cold things in general, are very bad for your stomach. They won't eat refrigerated fruit. I lived in China for a few years, and my roommate thought I was insane for refrigerating my watermelon. I found that was the safest way to store it because none of them would touch it. In Germany, they don't put ice in their water. I've never liked ice in my water, so living in both Germany and China at different points in my life worked for me. The US is actually pretty unique in that everyone wants their beverages ice cold. I had a Chinese roommate in college who kept a gallon of Sunny D out at room temperature for weeks while drinking it. Weirded me out. My grandparents laughed at the idea of a mobile phone, or sending messages through the phone line when fax machines were a thing. My grandparents didn't like computers and they still had a typewriter or wrote by hand. I was given a typewriter as a kid, but then I was using Windows 95. OG hipster right there. I'll be honest, as a 30-something-year-old, I have no idea what a fax actually is. The gosh darn answer would be one Google search away, but I'm going to live on in ignorance for a few more minutes, so you lot can judge whether this is normal or whether I'm exceptionally ignorant. Back in the 80s, I knew an old lady who used one of those really old toasters that could only toast one side of the bread at a time. As a present, we went out and bought her a modern pop-up toaster, but she wouldn't use it. She preferred to use her old one. I could see if she had one of those rad Sunbeam Radiant toasters, which in many ways are superior to any toaster on the market today, but this is just a fire waiting to happen. I see you've also watched that Technology Connections video. I'm the web designer for a local organization. Their treasurer refuses to accept card payment via their website. People have to print out forms, fill them out, and post them with a check. I also get paid by check with a handwritten note. They would be a much more popular and successful business if they just modernized a little. My law firm still uses checks. We're also on QuickBooks Desktop 2008, and our timekeeping software is from 2011. We don't use Word, we use WordPerfect, and our forms are still set up to double space after periods. Nightmarish. My grandmother didn't like to use the remote control for her television because she was afraid it would break somehow and function as a laser dangerous enough to set things on fire. My grandmother complained about remote controls for TVs because it would promote people being lazy. Because apparently watching TV in the first place is a rigorous activity. Modern day. I've had people tell me using a voice-activated light system in my house is lazy because there's something to be said for getting up and turning on a light. Like what? It builds character to flip a switch? I'll take my space house, thanks. My Depression-era parents refused to ever have AC because it seemed frivolous and unnecessary, and my dad chose seatbelts as the symbol of government overreach and refused to ever wear one. In 1980, we took a family trip from Virginia to St. Louis and back with 4 kids in the bed of a pickup truck. I remember my grandma telling stories of when AC was a new feature in cars. People would keep their windows rolled up in summer so that people in other cars would think they had AC. My parents didn't have AC. I begged for it constantly, and every time my mum would send me outside for a few minutes instead. That way, it would seem cooler inside by comparison. If it didn't, she'd tell me that I could go up into the attic and come back down. They bought an AC unit the year after I graduated and moved out. They just didn't want me to be comfortable, I guess. Being miserable builds character, or something. My senior year of high school, I had a series of newspaper articles in the local paper explaining how the web wasn't a fad and wasn't going away. Nobody but one guy at the paper believed it. It was 1995. My high school, I graduated in 2000, was like this. We didn't have computers in high school, and although there was pressure to buy them, the administration claimed computers were a dying fad, and spent the money that was to go for a computer lab on new football equipment instead. This was rural Pennsylvania, and I assure you, I'm not making this up. Others did bring up a good point and stated this is a tactic for administration to spend how they want versus what the school needs. Also, according to people who still live there whose kids now go to school there, the school did a 180 on technology in the early 2000s, and kids now have computer classes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a professor in college that taught building systems. He was like 80 years old, knew all of the new ways to build a structure. Never used CAD. All of his details and plans were hand-drawn. I've taught a couple of classes on how to use more advanced functions in CAD. None of my students had ever even seen a French curve before. I was purposely taught how to hand-draft in high school, 2007, before I learned CAD. My grandfather used to yell about, "You lazy kids and your zippers!" My father worked at a car dealership up until 2018, was a manager and had a computer on his desk. Someone filed a claim that he had harassed them, saying he sent lewd emails. IT came to his desk and logged onto his computer. Not only had he never sent an email, he had never read one either. He had more than 60,000 unread emails. His boss asked him how he knew about meetings if he never checked his email. It's not hard. You see everyone get up and walking to a location, you follow. Needless to say, he was cleared and the person making false claims was fired. Color TV. When they became common in the mid-60s, a lot of older people believed they emitted harmful rays. When Mum finally got one in circa 1972, it was kept in her bedroom and we were ushered in to watch it only on special occasions, and we had to sit at least 10 feet away. Given how small and low resolution even a big TV was in 1972, I can't help but laugh at the crowded family squinting to work out what was happening from across the room. My grandmother is 97 and told me about people who would refuse to get air conditioning or drink sodas because they're the devil's work. She grew up on a farm in a 2-room house with 11 family members living in that house. She always had sodas and the AC rocking and rolling all summer. My grandma is 79 and refuses to turn on her AC for religious and "it's gonna make mold grow everywhere" reasons. I swear she's gonna die of heat stroke one summer, but welp, she's into some kind of hardcore sub-Christian or Catholic cult. It's not Amish, Mormon, or the Jehovah's Witnesses, too minor so I forgot the name. Tech is not forbidden per se in their thing, but it's not liked at all by their thing. It's like everything bad that's happening to Canada comes from soulless new tech and immigrants. The whole thing is weird and doesn't make sense to atheist software engineering students like me, so I'd have trouble explaining more. My mother refuses to get a smartphone. She does, however, have a tablet with a data plan she takes with her everywhere, in addition to her dumb phone. When I point out that tablets are just big smartphones, she scoffs. What can you do? I don't read novels. My grandfather thought they were a plot by the elites to both ruin our eyesight and keep us locked away in a fantasy world. How old are you that the technological advancement your grandfather didn't trust was books? Socrates has joined the chat. Scrolls were good enough for my parents and their parents before them. Socrates didn't even really like scrolls either. Since your writings don't update as you learn more or change your mind, he thought that they would just spread misinformation and it was better to rely on talking. Love you, Socrates, but writing is the invention that allows for a large society to function. What Socrates needed was GitHub, to be honest. I said at one time I would never buy CDs. I liked albums and tapes too much. I never got rid of the albums and tapes, but now I have many CDs also. When they first became available, I honestly felt that both CDs and DVDs were just an industry conspiracy to stop people from recording their own music or movies with cassettes or VHS. DVDs were originally marketed as uncrackable or uncopyable, so you're not entirely wrong. I remember it being a huge deal when that guy found out how to do it and shared that info to the world. My grandpa used to tell me that he was basically set for life because he learned to read and write. Mass illiteracy wasn't as long ago as we like to think. Touch tone dialing. My mum refused to pay the $1 and change a month to have it. She finally caved in around 2002. Since several have asked, touch tone was a keypad, much like what almost every phone is now. Before that, it was a rotary dial phone. When my dad was in his 80s and losing some of his marbles, I started taking over some of his household chores and errands. Discovered that he was still using a rotary phone because he wasn't paying for touchtone. He was, however, still paying a rental fee for his telephone. He had been renting it for 50 years. We went to the phone store and got him a touchtone and they waived the fee, so that his bill pretty much remained the same with the new phone. I also got him a cordless, but he hated using it. He'd forget how to answer it. Press talk. Poke? It was sad to watch a formerly bright person, former high school teacher, totally unable to cope with simple household items. I still miss him. Digital clocks are lazy. My school has to hold an assembly for the 5th graders every year who can't read analog clocks because they can't afford to replace all the clocks in the middle and high school buildings. As silly as this is, I think that analog clocks will always be around. As a nearsighted person, I can often read an analog when my eyes can't see a digital one. Grandfather thought graduating high school was a big deal. He graduated in 1941 and was the first in his family. We had a great aunt who hated using the washing machine and claimed it never cleaned the sheets properly. At least in Costa Rica, where I live, at that time it was all you needed. Once you ended high school, you were pretty much set up for life. Some of my grunkles married shortly after finishing it and are still happily married. Boy, that's a different time. To think it was normal for people about my age to have been married and stable for half their lives, when a lot of my counterparts right now don't own houses, is just kind of wild. My grandparents were the first people to have a television in their neck of the woods, rural North Carolina in the 1950s. A big deal back then. Grandma told a story when riding on a bus back from work one day and a couple of her neighbors were on there too. They were talking about how the Blake Burners got one of them fancy TVs, saying how it was an evil thing and would simply be bad of one of them to buy one, and that they, the neighbors, were wise enough to never get one. Of course, they knew my grandmother was on the bus with them, as they said it really loud so she would hear them. Petty jealousy from them made my grandma run off the bus in tears. Story goes that Grandpa, a mechanic who was doing well enough that they could buy a TV, was so livid that he refused to work on those neighbors' vehicles for decades. He was the only mechanic around for almost 20 miles, which back then was an hour drive from anywhere else. An acquaintance of mine told me her grandmother doesn't own a refrigerator because refrigerators are harmful and for lazy people that don't want to cook fresh food. I remember people's parents not having microwaves, although by the time I was growing up that was pretty rare. The convenience had won over almost everyone by then. I've had a coworker about 52 years old, refused to use a computer because he caught his wife having an affair on a chat room on their computer, so he destroyed it. At that point, if she wants to cheat, she'll find another way. Yeah, she was cheating. The computer is how he found out, right? I still have a wall phone in my kitchen. A young woman at my workplace asked me in all innocence if I sell my house, will the new owners be forced to have a landline too? My grandfather refused to get a VCR, but not because he was a Luddite. VCRs were all made in Japan, and he'd fought in the Pacific in World War II, so he refused to buy anything Japanese. Interesting side fact, this is why Nissan originally started selling cars as Datsun. They figured there was going to be a lot of bitter vets who remembered Nissan making war materials. Did Volkswagen ever have the same problem? They did for a bit. The brand got passed around a bunch before they started production. It was even going to be given to Ford for free, and they declined. It was offered to a bunch of different English companies. They all declined. So it was given back to Germany under supervision. It might have helped that they didn't actually make that many before all the factories started churning out war stuff. Seriously, the very first assembly plant opened in 38 and the war started in 39. Not a ton of time spent making bugs. They only made 210 before shutting down. Civilian bugs only started happening in the late 40s and only boomed in popularity in the mid-60s-ish. 20 years after the war ended, and during an entirely different war, so I imagine for some, it was easy to ignore the German aspect. Rural areas are always fun for this. In a grocery store, I overheard an older couple, back in 1989, discussing their high cholesterol levels. They didn't trust doctors and said downing a cup of really hot coffee every morning would clear the obstructions. No need for fancy medicine. I'm 65. Back in the early 1980s, I remember my grandmother asking my dad if they still made cars with the levers, throttle and spark advance, up by the steering wheel. The last car she had driven was a Model T Ford in about 1930. My grandma refused to get a TV in the early 1950s. My dad always wanted to watch shows, but he had to sneak to his friend's house because she didn't believe in getting a TV. My grandfather was a Mennonite, but had moved to a city and was working in factories as an adult. He even used to watch TV until John Wayne died, then he got rid of their set. He said it was evil to watch dead people moving around on a screen as if alive, like watching ghosts. He would tell us that TV was the devil's work. As a kid, I started drawing cartoon characters like animal characters and stuff. One day, he asked to see my drawings and he was outraged, saying I was drawing the product of bestiality, said it was evil. All that said, I loved him, and as I got older, he and I got really close. He was a God-fearing man, but he was also a very humble, peaceful, and funny guy. He taught me woodworking, gardening, and the joy of just sitting quietly in nature. He was just trying to save you from becoming a furry. My grandpa had to fight a hard campaign to get his dad and grandpa to switch from farming with horses to farming with tractors. His grandpa continued to maintain the horses for his own garden until his death in the 1960s. What's the dumbest thing you've seen someone do to their vehicle? My old mechanic had a guy come in with a Ford Probe. He claimed it was low on oil. They take the dipstick out and the whole stick has oil on it. He checks again with the same result. The guy took the oil cap off and looked down into the hole and said, "See, it is low." He had put 3 to 4 cases of oil into the motor trying to fill the entire block up. The previous mechanic didn't know how to patch an exhaust leak and had tried to weld a Rockstar can around the leak. The leak caused the second oxygen bank to fail, which is why they tried to patch it with the can. Not a week later, the bank read a failure again. You don't weld it on, you use some sealant and a couple of Jubilee clips. How the heck do you even weld an aluminium can? Was he using TIG? This definitely won't be the worst one in this thread. I used to know a 30-year-old who would put the car air freshener duct-taped outside the exhaust, kinda just dangling in front of the opening. His logic was that it would make the exhaust smell better for pedestrians. That is oddly sweet, which was also the fragrance he was going for. Had a customer once who had their oil light come on and couldn't figure out how to top up the oil. He thought it might have worked like his boat motor, so he poured a jug of oil into his fuel tank. What would that do to a car? Fiery dramatic explosion or just engine damage? Assuming enough oil was added that it won't even start but it was cranked a lot, possibly not damage the engine but a lot of work to fix it. Drop gas tank, dump and clean. Clean fuel tank sending unit, replace filters. Flush fuel lines. Remove fuel rail, clean injectors and the rail. Clean intake manifold, pull heads, clean heads and plugs and valve train. Possibly pull exhaust manifold and clean that if any oil got through to there. I'm honestly not sure if it would even get past the injectors though. Depends on how much he added and how well mixed it was. There might be a couple of sensors to replace as well. Expensive, time-consuming, but I don't think it would do anything fatal to the car. I wrench on bikes, not cars, and at least once a month we have someone come in that put chain lube or grease on their brake rotors because they were squealing, and now they want to know why their brakes aren't grabbing. Oh my god, I love this so much. I'm a cyclist and a moron, but somehow I have never managed to plumb these depths of stupidity. And the sad part is that I'm all but certain someone must have done this to their car as well. I was working at a performance shop at the time, 2010. Golf GTI comes in for lack of power and throwing check engine codes for underboost and several for fuel trim management conditions. Did the typical process of checking the turbo wastegate operation, pressure and smoke tested the charged side of the turbo system for leaks, tested fuel pressures, all checked out. Removed the intake side from the turbo to inspect for rips in the rubber boot, all good. Looked inside the intake boot and this moron bought one of those turbinator gimmicky things and put it inside the intake. It had turned completely on its side and was restricting 80% of the airflow. Removed the obstruction and motor operating values returned to normal and power was restored. Didn't feel any guilt that this idiot had to pay a few hundred for me to diagnose and remove his awesome DIY performance mod. Not a mechanic, but former service writer. Woman comes in for an oil change, some common minivan, nothing out of the ordinary. Walked by the van while it was up on the rack and noticed one of the tires was nearly bald in the middle, cords showing. Textbook overinflation. I checked the tire pressure, was well overinflated. Then looked around the vehicle, 2 more tires were in exactly the same state, overinflated and showing damage from it. The 4th was a bit underinflated, no glaringly obvious tread wear. Pointed it out to the customer when she came back and asked if there's a reason 3 tires would be overinflated. Long story short, she was occasionally seeing a low tire light on the dash, no indication of which tire, just low tire, told her husband and he just aired up all 4 tires. Happened again and fixed the same way, rinse and repeat. So over time they kept the tire with the leak going but managed to ruin the other 3. Buy a tire pressure gauge if your car doesn't give you a per tire pressure reading. Completely fill their engine with oil and wonder why it's smoking and then locked up. Or put oil in the fuel tank because that's what they did on their lawnmower. My mom filled the oil with water when the car was overheating. She said that she knew it said oil, but she didn't know where else to put the water. She was just making some mayonnaise. Oh, the list is long. Removing PCV hose, assorted vacuum lines, O2 sensor, thinking that they're going to get better performance, cutting a wire under the dash to hook up a stereo, then bringing the car to me to fix the taillights, pouring 3 quarts of oil in but the dipstick still shows low because they put the oil in the radiator, putting gasoline in a diesel truck, again. That again just tops it all off. You think people would learn, but sometimes not, and those stories can make the best jokes. Did a co-op at a shop back in high school. Guy complains about how his car doesn't sit straight. We pull it in and don't even need to put it on the lift to realize that he has 17-inch rims on one side and 15s on the other. Took me about 45 minutes of explaining to him why cars aren't made like that before he told us that he'd be taking his business elsewhere. On a side note, the side with the 15s were like 100% bald, like racing slick bald, and everything in that car was falling to pieces. I have too many stories of crap I found in people's cars there, but this one has to be my favorite. Wait, he knew it was that way and he thought it was fine? What? I need to know more. Pretty much, he thought that it just had to roll. Honestly, I probably could have put shopping cart wheels on and he wouldn't have given much of a crap. Bit of a stretch, but you know what I mean. I bought my car off a guy for $785. For all intents and purposes, it worked fine, but the guy said it overheated almost daily. 99 Nissan Sentra, manual, 135,000 miles. If it didn't overheat, it would have been closer to $3 or $4 grand, maybe even more. I bought it anyways because I could try fixing it and because I was desperate for a car. My old one died and I lived 10 miles from work. So I brought the car home, the guy filled the radiator per an agreement we made, and the overflow tank was already empty. I started feeling along the coolant piping, and when it came to the thermostat sensor housing, I could stick my fingernail inside the gap. My fingers came out soaking wet with coolant. Went to a parts store, spent $10 on a housing gasket, $3 on some liquid gasket, and $50 on new oil, a new oil filter, a new air filter, radiator cleaner, and coolant. Spent an entire day putting that gasket in. The reason it took so long is a fricking story and a half. That was all about Murphy's Law. Changed the oil, cleaned out the radiator, and I haven't had any trouble since. All in all, a perfectly working car for about $850. I kind of feel bad for the guy who sold it to me. I brought a diesel Mercedes for $250 because the timing chain snapped. I bought it for parts, but it was a nicer car than what I had, so we were going to do an engine swap. Then I noticed the timing chain hadn't snapped, the belt tensioner had failed, and the timing chain cover had failed. Replaced the cover with one a friend had, got the car on the road for the price of an oil change. Maybe fork out for a mechanic's visit before you chuck your vehicles on eBay, people. If there's an easy fix, you could at least make another few hundred off the sale. Worked as a car cleaner at a dealership one summer in high school. Guy towed in a relatively new, top-of-the-line Corvette he had bought there sometime before I started. He was teed off that it had died on the road and had been running like crap before that, ranting and raving about how he spent all his money and it only went X months or years before completely breaking down. One of my work buddies got up on a lift and started looking it over. He opens the oil drain plug and nothing comes out. He pulls apart the engine and the oil could now be described best as glue. Owner talks to the guy and asks when was the last time he changed the oil. The guy had zero idea what he was talking about. He had no idea you had to do that. He assumed that you just added gas and that's the only thing you need to do. The engine was a complete loss, which meant that the car was a complete loss to him. If there's one thing I can take away from all these stories, it's that it's pretty astonishing how many people don't know or care to get their oil changed. I have a story for this. Some years ago, here where I live, there was a fairly widespread craze of mixing oil. I don't remember the type, but it wasn't at all related with the engine, like sunflower oil or something like that, with diesel, for better fuel consumption. The thought was that this kind of oil would burn anyway, and mixed with diesel it would give the same kilometers for less money. Of course, it wasn't the brightest of ideas, so I remember that despite being fairly young, I remember strongly advising against this practice. My mother didn't listen to me, then proceeded to top her Mitsubishi Pajero Turbo, great car for fuel economy, I know, with whatever oil she used. Now to be fair, the car held up pretty well despite the abuse, which is because it was a tank. However, it eventually succumbed. If I remember correctly, the fuel pump completely failed and had to be replaced entirely, but I might be forgetting stuff. The funny thing is, though, that the mechanic, after looking at the engine for about 3 minutes or something like that, asked almost angrily to my mother if she was using the oil. When questioned how he knew that, he said something along the lines of, "It's the fourth this week that comes in with this issue." Had a guy show up at a tire shop bragging about being blackout drunk and needing his tire changed. He had his spare on with 3 out of 5 lug nuts. He had tightened them by hand and they backed off. Had to replace all of the studs. Folk would come in asking for tire repairs or patches on tires that were literally cut in half. Like you drove on the rim for a week split down the middle in half. They'd get so offended when I explained that they not only needed a tire, but now a rim as well. I've seen a fake intercooler on a Sunfire, paper mache used instead of a Bondo, the list goes on. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a guy bring in his motor-swapped late 80s F-150 for some transmission work. These came factory with either a 300 straight 6, 351 V8 or 460 V8. He put 2.3-litre carbureted 4-cylinder out of an old Ranger in it. The reason behind the swap was that it would improve the fuel mileage at the cost of some speed. That thing could barely move under its own power. If you floored it, it would top out at about 55 miles per hour, wide open, and take a good minute or two to get there. Not a car mechanic, but I know a guy who used self-tapping screws to fasten a roof rack to his car. A few people have asked if it worked. Yes, but it leaked. I would not recommend it though, because the roof sheet metal probably doesn't have much load-bearing integrity. He must have run out of duct tape. Or crazy glue. Not a mechanic, but a car enthusiast. Saw a couple of cars where owners didn't know what basic maintenance was. Like no oil change, no brake pad change, the oil turned into jelly and you had to scrape it out. The most ridiculous thing were the brakes. My mechanic friend showed me the brakes of an elderly lady's car. The brake discs were gone, like almost completely wiped down to 5 or 6 millimeters. She said to him, "The car feels weird while I brake." If that sweet little old lady wants to drive around like that, nothing's going to stop her. I don't know, a brick wall probably would. A lady stated that her car said low coolant, so she filled up the coolant. She made it about a mile and the car started running terrible and cut off. Shop rollback picked it up. She filled up the coolant by removing the oil cap and topping the motor off with water. Let me tell you about Diamond Plate Guy and Focus Bro. Diamond Plate Guy had 2 things he used to modify his truck: a drill and a ton of diamond plate. It was an absolute base model V6 Ram 1500 with the exhaust chopped off, which I thought was bad enough until I opened the hood. He had drilled or glued diamond plate to every surface: air filter box, intake manifold, fan shroud, etc. This was 18 months ago. My eyes still haven't recovered, but this isn't the end. He had some crappy wheels that he'd painted white himself. I know this because he painted the inside of the wheel where it seats to the hub, which caused them to seize to said hubs. I literally had to buy a bigger hammer to smack them off. The Focus Bro, the guy had a custom straight pipe with full Sparco race seats, 5-point racing harnesses, lowering springs, and a base model automatic Ford Focus SE. There were any number of dudes I knew fresh out of high school who would buy their second-hand, run-down cars and soup them up in garbage like this. It's a real first paycheck move for a certain kind of guy. While sitting in the shop waiting for my own car to have work completed, I witnessed a customer and their mechanic talking about the customer's car needing suspension repair. The customer had tried, unsuccessfully, to do the repair himself. The mechanic asked him why some lug nuts were missing and others were loose. The customer replied how he thought he would be helping the mechanic by loosening the tire for him. The customer had driven 20 minutes to get to the shop with a tire held on by a few loose lug nuts. Not a mechanic, but we do almost all of our farm equipment maintenance. Brother called during a hellacious snowstorm telling me, "Hurry, get over here and bring beer." I arrive with Bud Light in hand. He's got 2 lawn chairs under his carport. We get a beer and settled in our chairs out of the snow. We commenced to watching his neighbors that were on crystal and higher than kites push this Mustang. They were trying to push start it. After about 10 minutes, we're hysterical. They'd been trying for almost 2 hours. It was an automatic transmission. You need to send an invite out to the rest of us next time. I'll bring the snacks. You can push start an automatic. It just has to be going faster than a manual. Dudes spending thousands of dollars modifying their pickups for off-roading, even though they spend 99.99% of the time on highways, and the furthest off of a road that they ever get is a logging road that a stock Forester could tackle with no problems. And then they complain about extra crappy fuel mileage and having to pay for new 35-inch knobby tires that only last about 10k miles because they wear super quickly if you mostly drive on pavement, and having to replace their front wheel bearings every other year because those larger wheels and tires are a lot heavier than the stock ones, and being super surprised to learn that parts for a 3/4-ton pickup can cost multiple times more than the comparable ones for a small sedan that they sold to afford their bro truck. I used to live in a small southeastern city and see a lot of suspiciously clean and undented bro-dozers driving around. What I wonder about these guys is, doesn't the tire noise drive you fricking insane? It's probably not something they even think about before getting the pickup jacked up to fit those 35-inch big blocks, but I would regret it so hard. I'm a rancher in Kansas, and before that I worked in the oil field going to rigs on soft dirt roads in the middle of nowhere. My trusty 04 Dodge Ram 4-wheel drive with everything stock and slightly more aggressive tires has been all I've ever needed to get through mud. If I couldn't get through it, you needed a tractor to get through. I fight the mud multiple times a year, and I still won't waste a cent on those lifted-up D-bag canoes that are driven by micro-PP wannabes. Service advisor here. Customer brings in a car last week Wednesday with a shaking issue. Cool. Take care of some of the issues the car actually has. Leave 10 times better. Issues include bad axles, TSB on diff, dirty transmission fluid, brown rear shocks, needing oil service. Done and gone. We listed the recommendations still required, but customer declined, only did axle and diff fluid service. Today, the same customer over the phone, "What in the fricking heck did you do to my car?" What's the issue? The issue is back and it's fricking 1,000 times worse. Why did I pay you? Okay, well if it's our repair that caused the problem, we're more than willing to see what's going on. We didn't replicate anything after test drive, so unfortunately we can't determine if it's the same issue without checking it out. I demand a tow truck be sent out and you guys have to flip the bill on this. I'm not paying for this nonsense. Sir, not a problem. If it is work we've done, we're happy to pay for the tow and correct the issues. But be advised, if the issue is due to other recommendations or a new issue, you'll be responsible for the tow fee. Yeah, that's fine. I know it's what you guys did anyway. Me. Okie dokes. Tow truck will be there within the hour. The tow truck picks car up, notices the issue, tells customer, notes it on the receipt, the customer signs and acknowledges it. We'll come back to this in a second. He gets the car, Punctures on the rear right outer tire sidewall, nice welt and gash the size of a penny, tire completely deflated, tow driver noted this, told customer and wrote it out and had customer sign it, grabbed the air hose, hook up to tire and just wheezing air out. Me. Well then. Yes sir, you had a flat tire where you were driving on it. Nope, not possible. It left here fine, and I barely drove it home and it sat since I picked up from you guys. According to the receipt, you acknowledged the puncture with the tow truck driver and signed it off knowing it was flat. But we did install a spare, drove about 10 miles on the street and freeway, and we cannot replicate the issue at this time. I can hear the customer trying to find the receipt, and he hangs up. Guess who just paid $75 on a tow bill? Ah, I see one of our male Karens made it into this story group. It's always nice to have a paper trail leading the blame back to the complaining customer. If only all of life was so satisfying. Mechanic here, lots of stories. One guy has OCD and got a license plate called Too Clean. Only let one guy in our shop touch his base model Dodge Dakota 2007. Had to double up on gloves and he would watch. Undersprayed his car with chrome spray. I work primarily on equipment. Operator calls out to his machine saying he had a crack on his boom. Think the first arm on a large excavator. I get out there and the whole boom has broken off and is on the ground. My favorite, though, had to be the operator who blew a hydraulic hose in a forestry setting. Maybe $200 to change the hose. Decides he wants to walk the machine out to make the hose easier and runs the machine out of oil, blowing up the hydraulic pumps, $26,000, 2 travel motors, $8,000 each, and the auxiliary pump, $2,500. The machine was down for 2 months for him deciding to walk an extra 50 meters out of the bush so he didn't have to walk the extra distance. I have tons of stories about lazy operators, but this is probably the laziest. Guy was convinced his tires were different sizes because they were rotating at different rates. Like he jacked up each wheel and put the valve stem at the top, went for a drive and they were not lined up anymore. I had to explain it with chalk and string in the parking lot. Bad snow day, for whatever the frick reason, we were open. Guy pulls up needing a flat repair. He pulled up in a way the car could just be pulled in. Co-worker goes to pull it in and can't stop, slams into his box. Wasn't going fast enough to damage anything. The car had 0 brakes. I say something to the customer. Oh, the foot brake? That hasn't worked in years. You have to use the handbrake. We inspect the vehicle and discover it doesn't even have brake calipers in the front, with the hoses clamped off and not an ounce of brake fluid in the master cylinder. And the most surprising part? They didn't want to have the brake repairs done. A customer brought their vehicle to the dealership I used to work for an airbag recall. They had bedazzled everything on the interior dash, including the covers for the airbags on the steering wheel and on the passenger side. I'm not sure she understands the fact that airbags have enough power to turn anything into shrapnel. I worked at a Chevy dealer and now work at a Jaguar and Land Rover dealer. I'm not surprised at people's stupidity anymore. More than once I've seen people add oil to the coolant reservoir. I've seen the inside of a motor where the customer never changed the oil since it was new, and the car had 50-something thousand miles on it. The dumbest thing I see every day is people come in with broke suspension parts, bald tires, and no brakes. They don't buy any of it and just want the oil change and insist we're trying to rip them off. But the same person will come in raising heck over a small safety recall and refuse to leave until it's done because the car's unsafe. Lady had a brand new at the time Subaru and was complaining about horrible gas mileage. People complain about gas mileage all the time and it's usually because of driving habits. I get the car in and it looks like she's hit something in the road and ripped a big hole in the gas tank, and all the fuel she put in poured right out onto the pavement. It was in fact a valid poor fuel economy complaint after all. Store workers and customers, what's your people of Walmart story? I worked at a Walmart for about 2 months. The weirdest thing I saw was an obese lady on a scooter run over a fat kid in the candy aisle and then threaten him because he almost tipped her. Security was called and she demanded to receive her items for free. Eventually, we just let her take the stuff because it was only like $5 worth of Skittles. What she really needed was tip assist. And some really good old-fashioned sketty wrestling. This is why some crap people continue to be crap people. You mother frickers gave them free Skittles when they caused a gosh darn scene. Just like my spineless corporate slave of a manager when I worked retail. I worked at Walmart last year as a cashier, and a woman came up to my register with nothing but a pineapple, and a damaged one at that. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, so it was a slow night, and she demanded I give her this pineapple for 25 cents because it was damaged. I didn't see any damage, so I asked her to show me the damage. She promptly ripped the top greens off the pineapple and said, "See it now?" I called my manager over and he said he can't sell it to her for a discount and he's sorry but she can get another one. She cursed, threw the pineapple at me, and walked out mumbling about needing a cigarette. She was a prime example of trailer trash, but damn she threw that pineapple hard. Fun fact, if you can pluck out the greens easily, it's a ripe pineapple. Usually the best metric I find is to smell it and see if it actually smells like pineapple. A lot of yellow is also a good indicator. You're correct, the most yellow while not having mold on the bottom is the best metric. Properly ripened pineapples are completely yellow, but they're never picked that way commercially and do not ripen off the plant, because they don't ship well when ripened. Here I am talking about a nightmare from my old job and suddenly I know how to pick out the perfect pineapple. So last year I worked at a Walmart supercenter as a cart pusher. You tend to see a lot of strange stuff in the parking lot, so all the weird crap doesn't even get your attention after a while. Part of the cart pusher's job is to bring back the store scooters after people leave them in the parking lot. One day I see an old woman outside the store just sitting on a scooter. This lady must have sat there for a good 2 hours before finally getting up to reveal a gigantic brown stain all over the lower back of her hoodie, running up and down her pants. This obese lady who saw the whole thing comes sprinting up to the scooter and sits down on it before I could even clean it. She looked at me and said, "I don't care, hun. It was the last one left and my legs is killing me." When someone is so large that they'd rather sit in a person's waist than walk, you know that they have a serious freaking problem. I feel like there's going to be an awful lot of humanity in this group of stories. Maybe I should attempt to resist the urge to make judgmental comments for once. My privileged and ailment-free butt doesn't get to cast stones at people who have trouble walking and controlling their bowels. This was back in the late 90s. I was working at Walmart as my first job as a teenager. I was floated to the garden department one day and there was a guy looking at lawn fertilizer. I walked over and asked if he needs help. He said, "Not now, just looking at the different kinds you have." Pretty standard reply from the guy, so I said, "Okay, let me know." I walked away and then swang back in about 5 minutes. The same guy has proceeded to rip open about 10 different kinds of fertilizer all over the ground and is rolling around in the stuff. He's also taste sampling the stuff. I call my manager because I don't want to deal with it. Security escorted the guy out of the store and called an ambulance in case the ingestion of the fertilizer hurt him. I was expecting the story to end with, "And the guy tried to buy all we had and then the feds showed up." Instead, crap osmosis. Saw an old man take a dump on the floor of the bread aisle once. I worked at Whole Foods and on shift a person in dairy dropped a load right in the middle of the aisle. They must have been extremely lactose intolerant. "What is that? Milk? Oh no!" Mother's Day 2013. I was CSMing and handling the day as best as could be expected on a Sunday holiday where the employees were mostly female mothers. We had 13 call-outs and 5 no-call, no-shows. I had 5 poor women to handle the whole Sunday. Lines were long, I knew it. I didn't have anyone in the store coming in to help, management couldn't spare anyone. They understaffed on purpose. So I hear a call over the radio that someone has busted an aerosol can and they needed one of the maintenance associates on shift to deal with it. Apparently some jerk teenagers thought it would be funny to pop about 5 air freshener spray cans and let them spin and spit eye-stinging chemicals. I'm getting yelled at by a blue-haired old woman about the lines when I get the call that made me regret waking up that day and coming to work. "Sharon, you see that kid in the orange shoes to your left? Stop him." "Okay, why?" "He messed himself and is tracking feces all over. I'm trying to find his mother on the cameras right now." "Oh great, now I have a feces-covered 5-year-old to look after on top of everything. Did you find the mum yet?" "Yep, she was in the parking lot doing smack. Cops came, I had to mop up the feces, mum went to jail for possession with intent, neglect, and other felonious activities. The kid got cleaned up, I bought him new underwear and pants and socks, and I hosed off his shoes. He went with a social worker. I wanted to quit after that day. Someday that kid will post on future Reddit about an awful time he had as a child, and the only highlight is the kind Walmart employees that got him clean underwear, pants, and socks. He won't remember who it was, but he'll wish that he could thank you for your kindness." Thank you for your kind words. I only did what any compassionate human being would have done. It's amazing how many people bring their non-service animals into the store. I don't have a problem with dogs and such, but when I see the small dog you're carrying scratch and dander falls into the vegetables you're looking over, we've got a problem. Once a woman brought a bird into a fast casual dining establishment at which I was employed at that time. I told her she could order and pay, but she needed to wait outside because animals weren't allowed. She pointed to a service dog and demands to know why that dog can be in the store and not her bird. I informed her that this dog was a registered service and support animal that had been certified in its role and is probably vital to its owner's daily life. She starts screaming, and I mean screaming, "He's a healing bird! I love him! He helps me!" Now birds, you may know, don't really appreciate loud noises accompanied by sudden movements of the arms. She's also flailing her arms, and it takes off flying around the store. Chaos ensues. People are mad, and I no longer have to try to handle this lady because her friend has caught the bird and is literally dragging her out. The dog was fine though. My town has a bird guy, an older gentleman whose budgie rides around on the bill of his hat. He takes the thing everywhere. Nobody seems to mind because it always appears to be totally under control. I once saw him in Walmart with a little perch in the shopping cart for his bird to ride on. Not a worker, but standing in line one night, a lady seemed to be having a hard time being a parent to her 3-year-old daughter. At one point, the kid asks if she can have a candy bar that was next to the register. The exchange went like this. "Mommy, can I have a Snickers?" "I don't give a damn." Kid tries to reach up for candy. "I can't reach it. Can you help me?" "You want me to help you get the candy? You need to get a fricking job." Sounds about as classy as my cousin. She was potty training her 4-year-old and the little girl says, "Mommy, I have to poop." Only for my crap heap of a cousin to yell, "I put you in a fricking diaper. Use it." Well, I thought this would mostly be a mildly amusing series of cutaways, like from the excellent TV show Superstore. Little did I know how sad it would get. I worked at Walmart in the toy department 10 years ago, right out of high school for extra money. The amount of parents who would drop their children off in the toy department like I was a babysitter was out of this world. By the time they'd left it, it would be a disaster area. On more than one occasion, I'd see them running down the aisle with their arms outstretched, just knocking crap on the floor. When the parents would come back, there was no, "Hey, let's pick all this up." They'd just leave. I only lasted a few months. I actually quit a week before Black Friday because we had an instance at our morning meeting where some of the veteran employees were telling us what to expect on Black Friday from customers. Examples include being spat on, pulled by the arms, knocked over, shoved, tripped, screamed at, hair pulled, threatened, etc. I went on break and didn't come back. Not worth minimum wage. That sucks. I can sympathize. I lifeguarded at a public school for several years in high school, and people did this all the time. More often than not, the kids under the age of 10. I yanked them out of the deep end, and they didn't have any parents or guardians with them. Unbelievably frustrating in both scenarios. You're the person who brought this child into the world, which means you're responsible for him or her. The worst part is that these people are the ones to raise lawsuits if their kid gets hurt while under your watch. I spent many of my summers at the local pool, but in my case, I was old enough to bring myself there, and it wasn't my parents just dropping me off. And older than their posted 13 and under must be with an adult sign. That pool actually did pull unattended children out when they noticed them, and get the police involved in returning them to their parents. Since nobody involved ended up amused by this, it didn't usually happen repeatedly. The one that sticks out in my mind is this couple of really overweight folks. That in itself is not such an issue, but it's the smell I remember. It hit me before I saw them, the very distinct smell of festering, unwashed body. And naturally, they came straight to me to ask for things. Ugh, I have a few of those where I work, and the two of them have no sense of personal space. I've taken to holding a large item in front of me as a spacer whenever I see them come in. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, I have so many people. But actually, why don't I introduce you to another worker? Meet Gary. Gary is 81 years old. He also fought in the Vietnam War. Gary is a short little cute old man. However, Gary is also fricking crazy. Let's go through everything Gary told me before I left for school. The Kennedys committed the atrocities of September 11th. Yup, the entire gang was in on it. JFK, RFK, Ted, Ed, and John. Why else do you think JFK and RFK were assassinated? Agent Orange is for wimps. Obama gave 2 statements after Charleston, one to the country and another to his cabinet that said they were going to take all the guns. That school shooting was fake, because Joe Biden actually adopted all the fake victims so he would never see them again. He owned a bunch of real estate in California and owned adult video stores. He actively went to adult flick conventions and said that he was in the committee to determine if someone could be a adult flick superstar, so that meant he got to do the deed with a bunch of girls. Blacks by law can't be police officers. If you want to woo, yes, he said it like Ric Flair, a female, you just gotta ask me for some tips. Alright, thanks Gary, I have a girlfriend though. My girlfriend's got a tight hoo-ha. Okay, Gary wasn't just delusional, Gary also didn't have a filter. Woman with a large chest walks past him. Did you see the bosom on her? And she heard him. John, if you don't go on break, I'm going to tie your braces to the back of my car and tear them off. I did the deed with my girlfriend last night. Oh, okay. I was pounding it from behind. Gary, aren't you like 80? Oh, don't worry, I took a pill before I did it. Gary wasn't just delusional and obnoxious, he was defiant. From day one to my last day, he had a theory that the boss was out to get him, and that the boss always got upset over petty things. He used to say, "Frick that wang-sucker Dave." But our boss didn't get upset over petty things, and his name was actually Bill. I miss Gary's crazy butt. Gary sounds awesome in small doses. When I worked in another department, I loved Gary because he was like that old man who sits on a porch. He would wave every time you passed because he was insistent that there needed to be someone at the cash register 24/7. There didn't need to be. When we started working together in the same department, we became enemies. I was being groomed to take over the department when the department manager was going to retire later that year. I'd started in April and they made the announcement in June. Gary had been there since 2011. I was 18 and he was 81. He didn't like it in the slightest. So we started butting heads constantly and he would threaten me with ridiculous things like tying my braces to his car. So then I responded right back. I got a wireless speaker, put it in the cash register place and played high-pitched noises until he yelled, "What the frick is going on?" And he would make ridiculous claims like that I'd set up a wire trap with a shotgun so when I came in today I would get shot, but luckily I saw the wire. I own a business in front of a supercenter. This morning I came in and noticed my dumpster was stuffed full with Walmart's garbage. I reviewed my HD camera and saw their contracted parking lot sweepers throwing over 20 bags of garbage away at 5:15 in the morning. I got in that gosh darn dumpster, pulled all those bags out and filled 6 Walmart carts up. I rolled them right on in front of the store and then I went back to my office, called the manager and told him that the next time I would call the cops for illegal dumping. Being in front of a Walmart sucks sometimes. There's a huge dumped cat colony and the place is a bum magnet. Thanks for reading, I just had to get that off my chest. Ah, that sucks. I think I would have called the manager first and had them send someone to get their garbage out of your dumpster. No point in you getting filthy because of their stuff up. Oh, I imagine there was a fair bit of catharsis in cleaning that stuff out and airing out all of their literal garbage in front of the store. Maybe not the most adult reaction, but I get it. So a couple of years ago, I was in between jobs, I needed loot to pay the bills, so I figured that I'd take a job at Walmart until something better came along. I ended up working in the lawn and garden section, which is actually fun when you get to play with the plants all day long. However, I wasn't aware that lawn and garden also does all of the holiday setup and placing said product on the floor. Fast forward a week before the public school systems were in session, I had a cart full of notebook paper, pencils, trapper keepers, etc. that I was trying to put on the shelves when a sound ripped through my eardrums that was similar to the ones that are typically only heard on the Discovery Channel. Several decibels too loud, the best I can describe it is cats being lit on fire by their tails and being chased by rabid wolves. I looked around to figure out who in the crap was being murdered in the store when I saw him. It was a kid about 8 years old who looked as if he was desperately trying to become Jabba the Hutt, and said kid was succeeding. Now, I have no problem with fat kids. I typically even think that they're pretty freaking cute. However, this kid was not, due mainly to the alligator tears that were rolling down his cheeks, the beach red color on his face, and the sounds coming out from his throat hole. It took me a minute to figure out what in the heck was going on in my aisle until I realized that this kid was throwing a fit because his parents wouldn't buy him 3 different trapper keepers. One of which was Hello Kitty. Normally I'd just shrug and say, typical Saturday in Walmart, but oh no. This little B-word realized that his dad wasn't paying attention to him and was instead focused on the others kids that I'm only assuming share some form of genetic makeup with this whiny beast of burden. This tees off the kid even more since he howls with rage and, here's where it gets insane, kicks his what looked like 8-month pregnant mother in the stomach. To her credit, this lady didn't whomp the spoiled little monster's butt right in the aisle. No, she instead collapsed on the darn floor and had to be taken away by paramedics, and that little B-word took that as a sign that he could have all the trapper keepers he wanted. I watched this whole thing go down, and as the dad watched his wife get loaded into the ambulance, not one iota of, "you're gonna get it later," came from him. Instead, the crap stain that kicked his mum started crying about being hungry and wanting chicken nuggets, which the dad then took him to get. This is why I hate people. I stopped shopping at Walmart when I went to college. The local Walmart was notoriously bad. 3 times in a row I went there and walked down an aisle just in time to see a kid peeing themselves in the aisle and no parent was in sight. The city made big news when the Walmart men's restroom was found to have a makeshift crystal lab in one of the stalls. Our area was predicted for a moderate snowstorm, but the weather forecasts gave it ridiculous numbers, like they claimed we'd have 6 inches of ice and 2 feet of snow in one night. Us rational people knew, and were right, that we'd probably get 4 inches of snow. But many people swarmed the Walmart, and a few people made a Facebook page showing how devastated the store was in preparation for Snowpocalypse 2011. The Facebook page showed pictures as the store was swept clean within a couple of hours of ramen, wine, milk, and cheese. My favorite picture that someone put up was the 40-year-old man who had a shopping cart with 37 gallons of milk in it. Nothing else, just a crap ton of milk. That man sounds like the guy from your elementary school math problems. Okay, so I was leaving Walmart with my purchases. As I walked down to my car in the parking lot, I saw a pair of adult sweatpants sitting in a sort of pile they do when someone steps out of them, with a massive, messy crap on top of them. I had so many questions. Where did the person go after detonating these pants? Into the store? Just bottomless into their car with crappy butt cheeks? Amazing. I don't work at Walmart, but when I was halfway across the country visiting some friends, the Walmart in their town had a crystal lab bust in the men's restroom. Oh, good old Muncie, Indiana. I used to attend college in that town. I just graduated high school and took a job at Wally World since they always paid above minimum wage up here. On the most part, Canadian Walmart is completely different from the what-the-frick mecca that is the American one. I guess the main thing that stuck was during the summer. I was working as a truck unloader in the back and had to bring out a skid of diapers and such to the infant section. As I approached, I noticed a smell. At first I thought it was that gosh darn bird that always flew around. I figure I hadn't seen it in days, so maybe it had died somewhere around there and was stinking up the place. I dropped the skid off and went past the women's changing rooms. That's where all the girls who worked in clothing hung out. I was hoping to say hi to everyone, but I noticed that they delta split from that location. Reason they moved? It was the epicenter of the smell. To this day, I have never smelled anything quite like it. I've worked in a microbiology lab growing mold and fungi. I've worked in hospitals and smelled all sorts of nasty. I put in some time in pathology labs. Needless to say, I've smelled a whole bunch of horrible things in my life, but nothing compares to that Walmart scent. What was it, you ask? Well, it turns out that an elderly lady had gone into the changing room and taken a giant Coke can-width grey-coloured crap with flecks of black in it, and a bit of blood coating some of it, all over the floor. The whole thing must have weighed 2 pounds easy. She wrote a little letter and left it in the room with the clothes she was trying on. All the letter said was, "I am so sorry." Needless to say, I think Granny had something horribly wrong with her, because crap doesn't smell like that. To this day, I assumed the black in the crap was dried blood from some internal issue, and I figured she tore her butthole pushing that monster out. The smell though, ugh, it's like if you huff an abscess while smearing yourself with durian fruit while taking a dump. It was easily the worst smelling thing I've ever experienced. In conclusion, some grandma took a horribly thick crap on the floor which had blood in it. I feel like at least once a week I have to do one story that makes me gag, and ladies and gentlemen, that was it. Congratulations everyone, I'll see you on the next one. Just last week I was unloading a truck in the back and this morbidly obese woman hobbles up through the big associates-only doors, bends over, and drops a load on the floor, pulls her pants back up and walks out. I got written up for yelling, "What the actual frick?" but after the managers looked at the camera, they thought it was justified for me to yell that and let me off with a warning. I don't know what happened to her, but the maintenance guys were teed off. I feel like Walmart is one of the few things where all of the stereotypes and stories you hear are actually super accurate. My experience though, a very overweight woman with a walker strapped to the back of her electric wheelchair was drinking half and half straight from a carton while she threw loose pairs of sandals all over the floor. I have a friend who hasn't been to a Walmart in 15 years. He flat out refuses to go in for any reason. He's a pretty down-to-earth guy, not the type who thinks he's better than anyone else, but he avoids Walmart specifically because of the people who shop there. His reasons usually center around crying babies, overweight aisle cloggers, and the few weird old men who sit by the entrance or exit gawking at the college girls. One day, my friend and I were looking for a certain product before leaving town on a trip. We had just been to a few stores around town and I kept telling him, I know that this is in Walmart, we should just go there. Finally, he agrees to go visiting Big Box Land, but he will go into the Home Depot next door to look for a product while I go into Walmart. As soon as I step inside the door, I see a massive woman on a motorized shopping cart with her massive 12-year-old son standing on the back of it. She's screaming at him, saying, "Now you get off of there, boy," or something like that. His retort, "Frick you, mama, you ain't even handicapped." I got the product we need that day, but now I do my best to avoid Walmart as well. I saw this lady start screaming about a golden lab service dog being too close to her child. The child was sitting in a cart in the checkout line and the dog was calmly sitting on the floor behind her. The dog doesn't even bark, lick, or move, nothing. And the woman gets ghetto and starts shouting at everyone in sight. She had to be escorted from the store and never got to buy her stuff. At least Walmart protected the real victim in this situation. People who don't believe that this stuff actually happens must have never worked in retail. I can assure you that this is an everyday occurrence around Atlanta. What was your most shocking discovery in an ancestry test? My biological dad left his family and 2 daughters in Washington and married my mum in LA 5 weeks later. I found his first marriage certificate, but nothing about a divorce. I'm pretty sure he was a bigamist. My father-in-law was married to at least 2 women at a time. Nice guy, but a man whore. And I think he just didn't want to let each woman down when she got pregnant and/or started bringing up marriage. My mother-in-law says that he was already married when they got married, but we also know that he has a child 3 months younger than my husband, and the woman and child both go by the father-in-law's last name. And that's not the woman mother-in-law claims he was married to when he married her. So he might possibly have had 3 wives at the same time. My husband has upwards of 10 half-siblings from his dad. Who has the time? Bigamy seems exhausting. Someone very close to me discovered that none of the ethnic background that they were expecting was present in the results. This person, whose father was deceased at the time, questioned their mother. The mother admitted that the person's father was not biological as they had believed their entire life. They were older than 40, by the way. The mother gave the name of the biological father. My friend then found the biological father, contacted him, and then discovered that they had several half-siblings. The biological father was unaware that he had another child and accepted my friend into his family, as did the siblings. I found out my dad is not my biological father. Turns out the family friend I grew up calling Grandpa is. Oh yeah, and he was also my mum's bariatric surgeon. That felt weird, man. Dang, he was supposed to make her belly smaller, and he made it bigger instead. I have an uncle that was put up for adoption. He contacted my grandma and she thought he was going to extort her. They're well off. Turns out he's a multi-millionaire on his own. They still have limited contact, though my dad has reached out and formed a relationship. Apparently they look exactly alike and have the same personality, which sounds kind of stupid now that I'm writing it out, but they're only half-siblings. Me and my half-brother look pretty much the same, and have very similar personalities despite having different dads. It's even funnier because I'm female, so does he look like a girl or do I look like a boy? Oh god. Best not to go down that wormhole. Why don't you just say that your beauty has a genderless quality like Tilda Swinton or David Bowie? Those two could basically be long-lost siblings anyway, and then you can move on. I was adopted and always knew I was adopted. My parents told me that I came from a family that had already had all of their kids. They lived several towns over. I was a surprise to them. 3 years ago, my wife decided to take some DNA tests. I figured, what the heck, maybe I'm a part Zulu warrior. That'd be cool. When the tests came back, I found out I had a first cousin. They had listed a public email. I emailed them, started comparing notes, and wham! I was in for quite a surprise. First, I was not born into a traditional family. Instead, my biological mum was single. Second, I was not a late addition. I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. I was the baby, but only by a couple of years. Third, mostly all of them lived nearby. Finally, nobody knew I was alive. My biological mum had passed. She had kept the pregnancy secret from everybody else. Before she died, she had confided in one of my biological sisters that she had had a baby a long time ago, and she'd put the baby up for adoption. She'd told nobody else. When my sister told the rest of the family, they didn't believe her. So when I finally looked them up, she was like, "See? All those years, I told you so. We have a baby brother." It was an amazing experience. I had no idea what I was getting into when I sent that DNA test off. So I'm in a similar boat. I was given up for adoption by my biological mum, and none of her family knew about me. However, I was not her first or last child. I was her second of 4 kids. My older half-brother, we all have different dads, I don't know who mine is, and I don't think my bio-mum does either, was adopted by my mom's parents. Her whole family found out about me when I found her when I was 19 and went to visit. It was pretty weird. I feel like the lucky one who got out. I don't talk to my bio-mom. She's not a good parent to my 2 younger brothers, and I hate that she pretends to know me or be my parent. My wife is adopted but found her bio-mum and did one of the genetic tests. Someone matched with her and asked if she knew such and such a name. She found out her bio-mum's husband wasn't the bio-dad, and it was the bio-mum's boss. Whoops. Not gonna lie, I'm adopted and I'm the daughter of an affair some unnamed man had with a waitress in her early 20s. I have no desire to take those DNA tests. Your wife is brave. My aunt discovered that her mother cheated on her father and she was the product of that affair, meaning she was only actually half-siblings with her 4 siblings. The rub was that my aunt's husband was married before he married her. The woman he was married to is the daughter of the man involved in the affair. So no one knew this, but my uncle got divorced and then married his ex-wife's half-sister. I guess he has a type. Wow, did it cause any problems with the family, finding out the other mother cheated? They only found out recently, long after the parents had died. I think my aunt is very ashamed to learn of it, but not any problems. My aunt knew her husband's ex from growing up and never liked her. I don't think she has any intention of having a relationship with her. A woman over in Chicago decided to find out who her real parents were. She was getting close to 60 and realized that there may not be much time left to find her father. So through the magic of ancestry, she was matched to my grandfather. She reached out to him and told him who her mother was. He didn't recognize the name but dug up his little black book and lo and behold, there she was. So now I've got a new aunt. My male cousin did one and found a female cousin that we didn't know about. He reached out to her and apparently our deceased uncle was good friends with her mother. Mum wanted a baby, so uncle got her pregnant simply as a sperm donor. Female cousin lived a few blocks away from my grandmother. She had met her a few times going around selling Girl Scout cookies or something. My grandmother had no idea that she was buying cookies from her granddaughter. That's crazy. I can't believe days go by and you wouldn't even know about your own granddaughter. Was it a coincidence that they lived so near to each other? I imagine since they live so close, they've gotten closer because of this as well. My grandmother never knew. She was very old-fashioned and would not have been pleased with the thought of her son having a child with someone he wasn't married to. We didn't know the cousin existed until after my grandmother passed away. I was approached by a married lesbian couple to be such a donor, but I was never able to bring myself to do it. I don't like the idea of having a kid that's technically mine running around and having nothing to do with him or her. I also found out from Googling that there really is no legal provision for such a situation, so you can get forced into child support at pretty much any time. Found out I have a different father. My dad also took a DNA test at the same time and found out his father, of 52 years, was not his biological father either. As it turns out, I come from a line of bastards. Where beer does flow and men chunder. You should just watch out if your wife ever gets pregnant, though. I found a half-sister that none of my siblings or mother knew about. My dad had an affair 50 years ago. He's dead now. For us, it wasn't really a surprise. We already knew we have a half-sister from another affair, but for the newly discovered one, it answered a lot of questions and gave her some needed closure. We all met a few times. It was pleasant. I like to think that there'll be lots of silver linings in these discoveries. So far, we haven't found out that anyone came from a family of war criminals or slaveholders, but I'm sure we'll find one by the end of the video. A friend who never knew who his father was, mum had a weekend fling in college and never contacted the guy after, had his wife help him to use Ancestry.com to try and track him down. My friend reached out and the guy was obviously surprised but flew across the country to meet him. They have a great relationship now, the dad attended his wedding, and they try to get their families together a couple of times a year or so. That's awesome. I was hoping DNA testing would find my husband's dad, but no such luck. Never found anyone on his possible dad's side closer than about a third cousin, so no luck even finding anyone who knows who he might be. My real father and my 3 half-siblings. It ended up being a really good discovery. Had a great uncle who learned that he had a son from his teenage years that he never knew about. Luckily, he was able to meet him before he passed away. Same here. At the age of 60, I discovered who my real father was and that I have 9 half-siblings. He was a bit of a dog. A friend discovered that her father was not really her father. Her mum had had an affair, and she was the result. It tore her family apart. Her father did not know he was not really her father. Note that she was 45 years old when this happened. I can understand the fallout with the mum and wife over the affair and secret, etc., but did her father basically end up treating your friend any differently after that? Yes, he basically stopped talking to her. She was very hurt by that. I don't know that he's ever started talking to her again. He was always a bit distant, but he just stopped their relationship. Yeah, no way. My daughter is 4, and if I found out she wasn't mine, I would be very upset and may have issues with my wife, but my girl would always be my girl. My son is my 4th cousin. We adopted him as an infant from an agency. Fun to find that we are actually related. What an innocent way to loop a branch back around in a family tree. Not me, but a family friend. He did the test and found out that he had a half-brother. Turns out his dad had an affair a while back, and that kid was a product of that affair. A full 100% older brother. My mother got pregnant by my father before they were married. Scandalous in 1960. So, with my father's knowledge of the situation, Mum left town and lived with my aunt until the birth. Mum gave the baby up for adoption and then returned home. A couple of years later, she married my dad and had 3 more children together, including me. 55 years later, after both my parents had died, my aunt let it slip that me and my siblings were not the only children of our parents. To paraphrase from Star Wars, there is another. My sister took a DNA test, and a couple of years later she got a hit. Soon thereafter, we met our new big brother and his family, wife and kids, and we've all become quite close. This is the exact same story as my mother. She was the one given away and met her 3 sisters for the first time when she was about 50. So if your parents were to explain what happened to them and how they gave the baby up, when do you think you'd want to have heard the news? Like when you were little kids? Teens? Early 20s adults? This is a sincere question, but feel free not to answer. I would have preferred hearing it from them after I became an adult. From Mum, at least. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My cousin took a test and goes on and on about how she's almost completely Irish. Our grandpa was German. I've heard from my mum as a kid that my aunt's biological father was probably her friend's father. I've looked the family up on Facebook and my aunt looks just like that friend. My cousin seems to have no idea of any of this. I don't think my aunt does either. Similar in my family, German grandpa has a child and grandchildren with no German blood. He's passed a few years ago, but the evidence is there. My ex-husband's family were proud of their Dutch heritage and claimed to be one of the founding families of the historically Dutch Holland, Michigan. His ancestry results didn't show any Dutch ancestry, instead he had primarily English and Irish ancestry. Oh my gosh, I grew up in West Michigan. The amount of people who say, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, without having an ounce of Dutch in them is hilarious. The Netherlands today has the reputation of being a fun-loving, party-happy, hippie country because of 100 years ago all of my ancestors leaving and everyone who stayed behind hasn't stopped celebrating. One of my best friends has a very French name and her family was always very proud of their French heritage, until her dad took a DNA test and found no French in their background at all. I remember someone posting on Reddit about the same thing. They were from a very Italian family. All Italian first names, they only ate Italian food. You know, the way Nana used to make it. Just super into their Italian identity. The guy found out through a test they were all Polish or something, and everyone in the family lost their minds. That my father is a registered unspeakable act offender. Parents are divorced, if you're wondering. How did a DNA test reveal that? Arrest records, archived newspaper articles, you'd be shocked at what information is publicly available in some areas. My dad and aunt found out they had an older brother. Long story, my grandfather had a fling before he met my grandmother, never even knew that he had a son, went and lived his life, and some near 60 years later? Boom, ancestry test, here you go. So another really good story from this one. I exported my raw DNA from 23andMe and threw it through Prometheus to find out why I have porphyria, which is supposed to be hereditary. My mum and dad are definitely my mum and dad, but neither of them have this, which means it was environmental exposure that caused it. Discovered a rare AMPD enzyme deficiency in my mum, found out that dad carried a recessive lupus gene and gave it to my sister. DNA is wild. So I did a similar health DNA test 18 months ago because I wanted to see if I had the breast cancer gene. as there are several incidences on both sides of my family. Got my results and became very confused. It claimed I had no Italian, despite my father's grandma literally coming over from Sicily in 1920. It took me a few minutes to realize what that actually meant. My parents have been together since my mother was 14. I was born when she was 17, and my father joined the military and married my mother. Called my mum and she literally said, "That's interesting." Then she asked me to not talk to my father and she would explain everything the next time I visited. She did not and just refused to talk about it. Honestly, I was just shook. I didn't see it coming and it was never even presented to be a possibility to me. My sister ended up doing a DNA test and it showed that we were half siblings. I went no contact with my mother 4 months ago due to this incident and several others. I haven't told my dad, but I realized that at some point the truth is going to come out. My sister matched with some of my father's relatives while I did not, so if anyone checks that crap, they're going to be asking questions. Yep, even as a big advocate of the truth, I can see why you wouldn't want to be telling your dad. As some people have pointed out, a couple of people just can't see past the betrayal of their spouse and the realization that they aren't actually related to their children. I hope it all works out okay whatever way it goes. Always thought my grandfather on my father's side was adopted and thought our last name was just that of the family that adopted him. One DNA test later, and the family figures out that my great-grandparents got pregnant out of marriage and ran away. They came back with a child, saying it was adopted so they wouldn't be shamed for him. That's how we figured out that my last name is for sure from blood. Not me, my wife. A few years ago, my wife and I both took the 23andMe test. One of her matches came back with 23%, which is high for someone non-family. She messaged him and they started talking. He was about 10 years older and said he was adopted and the only thing he knew was some basic biological info. From his age, that would have put her mum at 14, but her mum never said anything about it. So the two options were her mum got knocked up young or grandma had a secret love child. She asked her youngest uncle, who said that when he was a kid, he remembered his sister going away for a few months because she was sick, and the family just pretended it never happened. He also said that before his mum, my wife's grandma, passed away, she told him all about it. So now my wife has a brother, a sister-in-law, and nieces and nephews. My mother-in-law is still around, but my wife does not have the best relationship with her. So my wife wanted to make sure she had all the information before she even approached her mother about this. Because in my wife's words, her mum, she's a few crayons short of a full pack. But yeah, they talked about it, and after trying to change the subject several times, her mum finally told her what we'd already figured out. We found out that my grandmother was biracial. She was abandoned shortly after birth at a church by an older white lady, adopted by a white farmer with 11 kids, and stopped talking to most of that family due to nondescript unpleasantness as an older teen. She died 20 years before I was born and looks like Maya Rudolph in the few photos that I've seen, but insisted she was part Sicilian. My father and his brother both look more white than not. My father worshipped the ground she walked on and never questioned her ancestry. My uncle was always pretty sure she was black and argued with her a lot. Both dad and uncle ended up being super active in the civil rights movement and still are devoted to anti-racism work nearly 60 years on, which largely stemmed from these discussions growing up. Anyway, my mum, divorced from my dad, got me a DNA test a few years ago. My grandmother was definitely half black. I have no Sicilian or Italian DNA. I've connected with a few black distant cousins over email and Zoom, and I'm waiting for the pandemic to mostly end to talk to my dad about it and introduce him to more family. I bet Italian got used as an explanation for darker skin quite a lot. Apparently, many mixed-race individuals back then attributed their darker skin to Native American or Italian ancestors. I knew about being conceived using ART, but I didn't know about the Dugarish number of half-siblings I had from the same donor. Frankly, it blindsided my parents too. The documentary The World's Biggest Family is about a man who finds out he has about 600 half-siblings from his sperm donor father. Things like this have led to tons of reform surrounding sperm donor laws. Imagine all of the involuntary inbreeding that could come out of an unchecked system. It's scary, but a lot less likely to happen now, thankfully. Not me, but a friend. My friend, 34, female, decided to get her twin sister and parents a DNA testing kit for Christmas. When her parents opened the gift, they looked at each other and said, "Oh, thanks." They quickly tried to move on to other presents. My friend was slightly confused, but dropped it. Later they went for their Christmas Day walk. The mum and sister were walking ahead while she walked with her dad. Her dad spilled the beans. Her and her sister were adopted. The mother looked back and started crying. She couldn't believe her husband told her daughter without them talking about it first. They were going to keep it a secret forever. She'd never suspected she or her sister were adopted because they looked a lot like their parents. They're also very short, as are their parents. Whoops! My great-gran, who I knew, was an orphaned live-in servant in Greenock, Scotland in 1900. Got pregnant by her employer, got kicked out, ended up in the poorhouse where she abandoned the baby. DNA turned up the granddaughter of the baby. I met her in Glasgow a couple of years ago. She turned up as a cousin via DNA. I took a DNA test and found out I'm ethnically 25% Ashkenazi. After 8 months of serious digging, I found out my grandpa, my father's dad, is not my father's biological father. I have since come into contact with my half-uncle. He's super nice and I enjoy chatting with him. I love learning about my bio-grandpa and the rest of my family. We haven't told them and I don't plan on it. I have a small family, so it was such a great comfort to connect with more family, understand my lineage, and the history of my Jewish ancestors. Really a lovely experience. Hey, you might want to check if you have factor 11 deficiency. Pretty common. Shalom, fellow Ashkenazi. My great-great-grandfather claimed to be descended from Levites and said he was 100% Levite. I doubt it, it's been thousands of years, but I'm curious if your family said things like that too. My grandmother is the world's sweetest person and had a horrible, horrible woman as a mother. Her father, though, was incredible. She always talks about how I remind her of him, the small and sweet things they did together and how much she misses him. Recently, she told me that her mother would tell her, "He isn't your real father, you know," whenever she felt like hurting my grandmother some more. This continued until the day she died, and her father escaped her mother's abuse, and never spoke to my grandmother again. My nana doesn't blame him at all and still loves him very much to this day. She decided to go on Ancestry because she said she needs to know before she dies, although she said it wouldn't change anything about how she felt about him. Turns out, her awful mother was right. My grandmother found her biological family and loves to talk about her French heritage that she's learning about now. To this day, she doesn't hold anything against her non-biological dad. He took care of my grandmother when her mother wouldn't, knowing it wasn't his child. He loved her, soothed her, and nurtured her through as if she were his own. He saved my grandmother's spirit, I'll tell you that much. He helped shape her into the most miraculous human being I've ever met. To this day, I'll always refer to him as my great-grandfather, and if I have a son, I'll be naming him after him. The story always gets me very teary-eyed, but the thought of Alistair, my nana's pretend dad, always makes me really happy. I know it makes her happy too. What's the creepiest thing you've ever found in an old building? Went to an abandoned hospital. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof on the outside of the building. Locked steel door at the bottom, so the only way up was to climb the outside up to the first landing. My buddy boosts me up. I climb over and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I call down, we're definitely not alone here, dude." "No, but it's cool," says a voice behind me, scaring the crap out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy just standing there, coming down the stairs from above, hands up, palms out. "I didn't mean to scare you." He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step on the handle of the steak knife, lean down over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer homeless guy a beer, which he gratefully accepts, and we shoot the crap on the landing for a while. We're talking about the city, the cops, traveling, life in general. He's basically a drifter, been in town for a week or so, but a nice guy. Things are going pretty well, and then he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I frickin' hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens. You never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. He's definitely not joking, and there's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy is freaking crazy. "Yeah, man," I say, "we're human, we just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're gonna go ahead and move on now, we definitely don't want to be any trouble." He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer, carefully back up to the railing, jump down and walk away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders the entire time. He's just standing there, still and silent, watching us leave. That place is still abandoned 5 years later, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways that you can't see coming. Holy crap! This guy seemed chill, but meeting people like him is what makes me tense when reading these stories. Ghosts? Monsters? Screw that, I'm worried about meeting some unpredictable creep or a Satanist mid-ritual. Also, serial killers. I wonder how many of his ilk I pass in normal places every day. Definitely don't want to meet them anywhere, especially alone in a dark abandoned building. That's a cool story for sure though. A group of my friends and I explored an abandoned asylum/mental hospital a couple of years ago in the OKC metro. It was very unsafe at night for a silly college freshman like us. The first experience we had was all of us taking our merry time enjoying the darkness and generally messing around. You have to come in through a broken window, and we were all gathered at the window just being dumb when we hear loud, echoing footsteps down the hall running toward us. We all did that. Who the heck isn't here? Who's messing with us? Look and turn, and after realizing that we're all present and none of us are sprinting down a dark, abandoned hallway, we booted it out of there. The second time we could hear a group of people messing with us, jumping from around corners and such, but they never got too close. We assumed it was an animal at first, but got brave and realized it was a person. We managed to catch them, and after staring at a collection of seemingly drugged-up 20-somethings who begged us for cans of paint and cigarettes, we got the not-so-good vibes. Finally, you say? And we tried to leave. The leader of the haunted asylum cronies asked if we had jewelry, which we denied. He then said the creepiest thing I've heard in my life. I like jewelry. I take it off the girls here when they sleep. We fricking bolted. What? Why ever did you run? Seemed like a nice, well-adjusted fellow. People these days are so judgmental. I'm kidding, of course. I wouldn't blame you if you were still running, guy who wrote this story 6 years ago. Nothing big, but I was once exploring a drainage tunnel with friends. We were pretty deep inside of it and turned a corner to see someone leaning against a wall with a hat on. It ended up being a sandbag someone dressed up, but it scared the crap out of me because it was pretty deep in there. There were pants and shoes and a jacket with a hat on it. I don't know what they did to make the jeans look like legs because I didn't touch it or go back. A friend of mine went back and told me it was a sandbag and I was already done for the day. So someone a long time ago went in there and dressed up a sandbag just so someone else would be spooked? We were kids exploring an underground flood channel. There were spots we could climb up and dangle our arms out of the storm drains on the street, but that required crawling up weird diagonal tunnels. There were 4 of us, maybe 12 years old, 1 flashlight. The walls were all graffitied with a lot of gang stuff and even warnings to turn back. Blah blah blah. We just interpreted that as other kids being bored. We got to the spot where the ceiling angled down quite low to the point the opening was so small we had to crawl to continue. Challenge accepted. It looked like it opened up again shortly, so we crawled through 5 to 6 feet of the low area when it opened back up. It looked like we were in a large round concrete pipe. Before it was square or rectangular. Still lots of graffiti. We started yelling and playing with the echoes, then we thought we heard something, so we got quiet. Then a real loud, "You're gonna fricking die!" came echoing from the darkness. The kid with the flashlight ran so fast, the rest of us were left in absolute darkness. Anyways, this was the first time we passed the low spot, but the last time we went down there. None of us died that day, the rest of us ended up quietly and slowly walking out in the darkness. This isn't urban exploration, more rural exploration, I suppose you could call it. I was working on a project for a photography project. There was a massive forest up a mountain near where I live. Said forest contains an abandoned hospital that was shut down after an unexplained death. No, I'm not joking. So it's a crappy day weather-wise. I'm in a wood with a camera and a packed lunch ready to go wandering. After a few hours, I found a small camp with some abandoned tools, including a massive bolt cutter. Someone had tried to destroy them in a fire, but that was a no-go. Maybe 200 to 300 meters away, I found a burned-out car. Not an uncommon sight in the area. Kids buy super crappy, clapped-out bangers and trash them up there. Not far away, about running distance, I found a pair of woman's jeans. And a little further away from that, maybe 5 meters or so, there was a pair of panties hanging on a low branch. They'd clearly been there for a while. I'm not sure how long underwear would last exposed to Irish weather, and these were right out in the open, but a few weeks maybe? Pretty creepy finding all of that alone in the woods. I flipped through local news for anything on any break-ins, assaults, or anything suspicious, and couldn't find anything that had happened recently. For the record, I did contact police, but they pretty much told me it was just littering, no actual evidence of any wrongdoing. My friends, who always go exploring, told me about this time that they were just following a trail that went up into the hills, and after almost reaching the freeway, they ended up near an old closed-up train tunnel. They were able to squeeze through some of the loose fencing, and after wandering through with nothing of interest, they eventually came to a bunch of shipping containers. They told me that when they glanced inside, they saw a ton of weapons and ammunition in one, and just a crap ton of heavy boxes in the rest. After a few minutes of checking it out, they heard voices from further down the tunnel coming closer, so they got out of there. They also said it almost smelled like the ocean toward the end, so the tunnel might have led out near the beach. The place they hiked to was somewhere between Santa Barbara and Oxnard in California, as they stopped on the 101 going southbound and started their hike and ended up returning to the car and going to Oxnard at the end of the day. They made a report to the police, but I haven't heard of anything coming of that on the news or otherwise. Also, some people said it might be smugglers, but given that the crates were unlocked, the tunnel was unguarded, and it was accessible to anyone who wandered out there, I doubt that's the case. If it was, they were either just about to take off or they were really stupid smugglers. Last winter, I went into this abandoned parking lot under a closed shopping mall. It had 2 levels. The upper level had a bit of sunlight coming in through the windows, but the lower level was pitch black. I made my way down this wide ramp that the cars would use, and I decided to have a look at the bottom level. After turning my flashlight on, I noticed that the space was huge, much bigger than the upper level. I remember how the light danced through the many supporting pillars and cast vivid shadows. I said, "Hello," and "I'm just looking around," just to make my intentions clear, but was met with no response. So I decided to walk around for a bit, but couldn't see anything of interest. Just a lot of junk, some empty old bottles, but nothing that might indicate someone living or hanging around there. The place seemed completely abandoned, however this uneasy feeling that someone might be hiding in the pitch-black shadow of one of these pillars took the better of me, and I climbed up the ramp. I left taking a different route and passed under an overhead clearing that snow had fallen through. Just as I was about to hop the fence and leave, I noticed that the patch of snow that had formed had footprints on it. I know this doesn't really sound horrifying when you read it, as the logical explanation was that some poor chap had probably taken shelter from the cold outside, inside the lot. But still, being there creeped the heck out of me. I don't know what's creepier, this place or you saying, "I'm just taking a look around to make sure nobody was there." If I were homeless and living in an abandoned place, I wouldn't respond to anybody saying, "I just want to look around." It seems like an easy way to make yourself a serial killer's next drifter victim. No thanks. Rural area landscape photography. Happen upon a long abandoned house and set up to snap a few images. Look in the window and it's perfectly furnished. Piano with music open, fishing gear, wood stove with fire nearby, magazines on coffee table, jackets on a coat rack, roll-top desk open with neatly stacked papers, family photos, small kitchen table with red tops and matching chairs, and one is pulled out. It was all covered in inches of dust. It looked like someone walked out in 1950 and never returned. That sounds equal parts haunting and beautiful. Although I'm not superstitious, my hackles would be up and I would be out of there at the first sign of any shadow that even looked vaguely ghost-like. Went to a closed-up mental hospital in my city with some friends at night. Everything was cool until we got to the basement, where there were 5-meter wide and 4-meter high lit tunnels going far to both directions. We headed down one and found a huge active generator. Then we went to the other way, and as we were about to hit another intersection, we saw 2 men wearing full green attire and face masks walking at the end of one of the corridors at 2 a.m. We got out of there real quick. This didn't happen to be in Northville, Michigan, did it? If so, it's really more of a teal outfit. Well, we found the crystal cook, guys. Went to an abandoned retirement home/assisted living facility. Turns out it became the home to a group of crazy homeless crystal addicts and one very angry raccoon. They did not like trespassers. The guardians of the galaxy have fallen on hard times. I was exploring a certain abandoned mill near a large city on the coast with a friend. We snuck in, messed around a bit, and realized that we only had one flashlight. Took turns, weird noises, dark inside because there's no power, evidence of homeless occupation and empty needles. Real horror game material. We came up the stairway and turned a corner. Ahead is a walkway bridge, aka the way to the rest of the building. To the right is a pitch-black room that doesn't feel very nice. As we walk toward the bridge, the flashlight picks out a sign that says, "To hell," and points towards this dark room. We didn't go in. It didn't feel right. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friends and I used to explore this old factory/processing plant, no idea what it was originally. Anyway, it had lots of underground sections that were pitch black, even a couple of meters from the entrance, but which also required going down a flight of stairs. One time we found a burned out car 2 to 3 levels down, no idea how it got there, but that was kind of creepy. Another time we found a hole. We didn't bring torches or flashlights with us because we're idiots. But we had lighters and we were trying to figure out what the hole was or if it could lead anywhere. We put a stick in there and it ended up being at least 6 feet deep, but we also learned it was full of some liquid and that if we had fallen in we could have easily drowned in the dark. Another time we went a couple of levels down and one of us at the bottom started screaming shrieks of absolute terror and the rest of us thought that we were all going to be murdered. We all started running, everyone was screaming at this point, and there was this sludgy crap on the ground, and some of us slipped and fell just like in a gosh darn horror movie, slipping and sliding, our limbs out of control. Again, there's 6+ people screaming bloody fricking murder with absolute fear and terror on their faces, so we all thought we were going to get murdered. Turns out a baby bird had made a nest down there and my sister got spooked and my friend screamed like an absolute baby. There was an abandoned hotel I was checking out. I gained access through a blown-out window near the indoor pool. It smelled like death inside, came in to find a couple of bloated dead deer in the slime collecting towards the deep end of the pool. That should have been my sign to go. I make my way into the lobby and banquet areas, and I come across a couple of raccoons and squirrels who scurry away swiftly. Nearly everything is destroyed, even the reception desk has been ripped in half. Nothing of interest to photograph, just trash. Neat little piles of trash. After a bit of searching, I find the stairwell. There's an odd noise coming from above that I brush off as rain. I decide to skip a couple of floors because they're probably in the same condition as the lobby, and a lot of the exterior windows had been blown out. I get to 4 and open the door, not worried about noise as I'm confident that I'm the only sober person on the premise, if not the only person. As I pull the door open, the rain noise suddenly ceases completely. I point my flashlight down the hallway and see hundreds of geese poke their heads out of the guest rooms. I remember the moment when nothing moved and we just stared at each other as lasting several minutes, although I'm sure it was about 10 seconds. Here I am in the middle of the hall, geese of abandoned luxury staring me down. Once the initial shock of the sight wears off, I remember I'm only looking at half the floor. Behind me, geese aren't pulling a deer in the headlights move, they're coming toward me. Time to go. I close the stairwell behind me, only muffling the cacophony that erupted once I moved. As I hustled down the stairs, I realized the signs were there. Goose crap everywhere. I hit the lobby and turn toward the pool where a group of geese has collected as if they were trying to trap me. Luckily, they're just dumb birds. I got out to find the exterior of the hotel swarming with the frickers. There was one lone sentinel standing on the roof honking out a shrill command that the perimeter had been breached. Exploring an abandoned construction site. It's a site out in redneck country that's got a bunch of old construction vehicles getting overgrown with plants, and my girlfriend and I decide to check it out, to see what it's all about. We look around and don't see a whole lot. It's about to rain, so we decide to head out. As we're getting in my car, my girlfriend freezes and says, "There's a guy in the woods watching us." I crap myself and ask if she's sure. She repeats herself and says she saw her see him, and he laid flat on the ground to hide himself. We noped out of there real frickin' quick. I live in a large African city which still has a fair amount of undeveloped or undevelopable space. And one rule to remember is that there is always someone else there that you may not see. There are people who sit alone, very quietly, in bushes or between boulders and other such places. They are, I think, harmless and don't do anything. But what they are doing has been a mystery to me for the 10+ years I've been here. Most of them are too well dressed or well taken care of to be homeless. One annoying thing is that they stare at you, or at least they don't hide the fact that they're watching you. I swear, if there was some completely inaccessible cave high up in a cliff here, requiring professional scaling equipment to enter, they would find a local African guy just chilling inside with no discernible means of how he got there. I mean, honestly, if he can get up there along with his means of cooking and entertaining himself, that just deserves an applause more than anything. Got to admire the effort. This phenomenon of the people in abandoned spaces has raised some questions, detailed here. This is the funniest crap I've ever heard. Please work up the balls just to talk to one and see what's going on. Well, greetings are very important here, so if I stumble upon someone like that, I'm obliged to greet them. They just greet back normally as if we're neighbors passing on the street. But I don't stop and talk because I don't know what they're doing. I've encountered this too in Madagascar. I'm not exactly sure what it's about. There it's just mostly older folks. Maybe they've reached a point in life where their kids are taking care of them and they're respected, so they just hang out and think. I guess a lot of the ones I see are older, that's true. I went to the abandoned living complex in Pennsylvania called Concrete City. We walked around a bunch of the buildings and stuff. At one point, one of my friends yelled, "Rich, come here!" I ran over, and there they were, 2 little kittens on a staircase with the words "Cloud Swag" spray-painted above them. We brought them home and I kept one. He still terrorizes me every day. When I was in college, a few friends and I went to this local abandoned hotel. It was a swanky place back in the 50s, but had just been sitting around abandoned and fenced off ever since. We walked by and saw an open window on a second-story ledge and ended up finding an old wooden ladder nearby on the property. We went in and hung around a bit and saw a bit of great graffiti. The whole place was trashed with actual garbage as well as bits of the building that were falling apart. We made it up the staircase to the third floor, looking in each of the rooms. The area we were in used to be the housing for the staff of the hotel. The third floor was covered in garbage from throughout the years. We got to the last room on the third floor and looked in it to find a lit candle, with no one else around. Realizing we weren't alone, we booked it out of there, and once we were outside, looked up to see someone watching us from one of the windows. Now, we went to college in a city with a significant homeless problem and assumed we'd just stumbled onto someone's home, but still, that crap freaked us out. They cemented up the place after another explorer fell down an open elevator shaft and broke his legs, and it has recently been renovated and they're turning it into an apartment building. Not the creepiest find, but definitely freaked us out in the moment. In conclusion, searching an abandoned hotel, we found a lit candle that wasn't ours and was secretly watched by a squatter on the way out. This happened 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. My urban explorer friends and I were on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area when we discovered a really creepy cave. An old abandoned cement mine, we later learned. We did some mild exploring that first day, but quickly realized it would require a lot more gear to thoroughly explore. Flashlights, respirators, etc. About a week later, 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered that there was basically one main shaft that sloped downward and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down and was pretty well graded, so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery, and rusting equipment off this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning. We were trying not to get lost or confused. Along the way, the walls were littered with the classic abandoned graffiti, X was here, swastikas, initials and dates, phallic drawings, etc. As we got deeper and deeper, the graffiti really thinned out. At this point, the light from the entrance was long gone, and we were relying solely on flashlights. The air was so stagnant and hazy with particles that the light from our flimsy flashlights would only go 20 feet or so before getting totally obscured by dust. Thank goodness for the respirators. The glow sticks we had bought to mark our way to prevent getting lost were also basically useless because they would disappear in the haze only a few steps after dropping them, and we had only brought 10 or so. At this point, we started arguing amongst ourselves. Several of the crew was nervous about going any deeper with the air quality being so terrible, and without a good way to prevent us from getting lost. We were probably a quarter mile into the earth now. The rest of us managed to override that sentiment of fear by assuring them that the path was easy and straightforward, so we'd have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our level-headedness, sense of direction, and flashlight battery life to get out. Despite the agreement to push on, it was becoming very creepy for everyone. We walked for a while in silence, hearing nothing but our own movements and the steady drip of water coming from somewhere deep in the cave. I think we were all pretty scared at this point, but no longer willing to admit that to each other. Then we stumbled across something that made us all stop cold. Dug into the side of the deep stone shaft we were slowly descending was a tunnel, an offshoot. It was narrow, you'd have to crouch to go through it, and it was also a good few feet off the ground, so it required a scramble to reach it. But that wasn't what made us stop, it was the graffiti. We hadn't seen any for 10 minutes or so and assumed that the artists never came this deep. But someone else clearly had, and the message they left us was ominous. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all of them somehow relating to death and destruction. Scrawled throughout the tunnel were words like suffering, pain, plague, disease, and hell. It was pretty terrifying. Who else would come this far just to write such terrible messages in a mysterious tunnel that broke off from the main path? But there was no turning back now, we had to see where the tunnel led to. Despite our fear, we were overpowered by intense curiosity. So one by one, we crawled through the tunnel to the other side. What we found was a strange flooded chamber. Around the pool of water were many large stones, each covered in dozens of burned-out tea candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in the place. The walls had a few creepy monster faces, poorly graffitied on them, and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was ringed with a spray-painted, blood-stained mouth. What was this place? Some weird ritual site for local Satan worshippers? An elaborate hoax set up by a bunch of kids? We couldn't find much evidence to figure it all out, and we were running out of adrenaline to keep exploring. We all crawled out of that weird hellhole and back into the main shaft, where we promptly headed toward the exit. When we finally saw that pin crack of natural light coming from the real world outside, we were flooded with relief. We never did figure out what that mysterious cavern was for, and I think I'm content to leave it a mystery. No, we didn't hear any monsters in the depths of the tunnel or find any bloody Satan praises themselves, but just finding that room, buried deep in an old forgotten mine, was enough to creep us all out for a long time. Lawyers and law enforcers. What are the most common laws people understand incorrectly? Many people assume that if the police, in the USA, don't read you your Miranda rights when you're arrested, it means you win the case. Not so. It only means that you may get things you said excluded from trial, if you said them in response to police interrogation while in custody. I got arrested and they didn't read my rights until we got back to the station. Unlike in movies and TV, where they read them right away usually. The whole time I had a shred of hope that they would forget and I would get off because of that. It can ruin the DA's entire case, however, particularly if the person who is arrested makes the classic mistake of talking to the cops. Basically, if they don't read you your Miranda rights and you subsequently confess to the crime, that confession goes out the window, along with anything they've got on you as a consequence of that confession. For example, you confessing and telling them where your stash was, etc. Unless they can convincingly prove that it was not as a result of that. For a lot of minor crimes, the DA actually will not pursue it if your Miranda rights weren't read to you, as the level of difficulty has increased too much. I should point out the above only applies to evidence gained after arrest while the police are interrogating you. I'm just clarifying that's what I'm referring to, not you spontaneously confessing in the back of the cop car. The European Court of Human Rights has nothing to do with the EU. Actually, I did not know this. It's not quite true. The ECTHR initially had nothing to do with the EU, but now the EU is a signatory and EU countries have to be signatories. Tell that to the tabloids. I hate seeing the two conflated so often. Is this a common error where you're from? It's kind of willful ignorance on behalf of people in the UK who think we should leave the EU for no reason other than recovering our sovereign power. Lawyer here. I like when people say, "I'll see you in court." No, you won't. Most of us rarely ever go through a full-blown jury trial like on TV. We avoid jury trials as they're expensive and time-consuming. But saying, "My attorney will see your attorney at a settling table at one of their offices to work out a reasonable agreement," doesn't quite have the same ring to it. I like that one better. Feels less like an escalation. Less, "You will be hurt for this," and more, "This'll get sorted out by professionals. This is my pro's number. Have your pro call them. Cheers." No, as a dramatic diva of a man, I have to say that not being able to scream, "See you in court," at the slightest inconvenience would be a significant detractor from my life's enjoyment. That you're entitled to one phone call from jail if you're arrested. This is not actually a constitutional requirement or even a nationwide standard. Telephones wouldn't need to be invented at the time of the drafting of the Constitution in order for a constitutional requirement, or right, to attach to the technology. Case in point, the Supreme Court unanimous decision this week that a warrant is required to search a person's cell phone, an extension of constitutional search and seizure protections to cell phones, which didn't exist until 1872, more than 20 years after Thomas Edison invented the Constitution. That some of your rights only apply to the government. Yes, a private citizen or business owner can certainly inhibit your right to free speech. More people need to recognize this. As a weapon owner, my individual right to own and carry a sidearm ends the moment I go from a public place into a private business or residence abode. If they disagree with me, they have the right to remove me from their premises however they see fit, as I'm now infringing upon their right to exercise, or not exercise, their Second Amendment rights within their walls. I use the Second Amendment as an example because it's the easiest to convey since there's a physical object involved. This applies equally to all rights though. In the cliché example of shouting, "Fire!" in a crowded theater, this person is infringing upon the exercise of a business's First Amendment rights. Because they would be within the walls of that business, the business rights trump their right to say what they want. Furthermore, in the theater example, the person who shouted fire could also be charged for needlessly causing mass hysteria, which is against the law as well. Freedom of speech is restricted in certain cases. Almost. Fire in a movie theater is an example of limits to free speech in a public space, as it threatens the livelihood of your co-citizens. It's an example of the clear and present danger portion of the incitement test, which is commonly known as the prohibition of inspiring an angry mob into action with free speech. So yes, if the US had a Tahrir Square and it was filled with angry protesters, you might not be allowed to get on a megaphone and demand revolution. It would depend on how likely the protesters would be moved to violence in the near future. I like to joke that you can advocate the overthrow of a government until there's a chance of anything actually happening about it. Businesses are not required to accept your 10-pound bag of pennies because it's legal tender. It just means that you can use that to pay and debts that you have. And as you're not in debt to that business, yes, they can refuse your legal tender. This concept came up on Reddit a while back. What I took from it was that McDonald's can refuse your money, but Applebee's can't. Yes, when you want to eat something at McDonald's, you're effectively proposing a trade for the food. When you want to eat something at Applebee's, you're going into debt for the cost of your meal. All debts in the US must be able to be paid off with US currency, but no one has to accept an offer to trade with US currency. It depends on whether you're considered a debtor or not. For instance, if you're attempting to purchase something, then you're not in debt to the store and they can refuse to accept the payment. However, if you tow my car, impound it, and then tell me that I'm in your debt for X dollars and that you will not return my car until then you would have to accept X dollars worth of pennies unless there was some existing contract between us that said otherwise. That only the government or the government employees acting in their official capacity can violate a person's federal constitutional rights. To use a somewhat outdated example, the Duck Dynasty guy has a First Amendment right to say what he wants, but A&E can fire him for it, call him up, rehire him, fire him for practicing his Second Amendment rights, call him up, rehire him again, and fire him for petitioning the government. They may be violating American ideals, state constitutions, or federal and state statutes, but they are not violating his First Amendment rights because the Constitution only binds the federal government, and selectively state governments through the 14th Amendment. A&E is not a government entity, so the federal Constitution doesn't prohibit it from doing anything. I hate how no one on my Facebook seems to understand this. People seem to think that pleading insanity means getting off. Generally, you go to the mental health facility until you're cured. Possibly forever, well, just until a board of doctors are willing to bet their reputations that you won't break any more laws, instead of prison for X years. The amount of time spent locked up after a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity is almost always longer than the amount of time that would have been served if found guilty. However, sometimes, the institute is a much better place than the prison you would have ended up in. You never really hear about mental health facility gangs. They think they see you, but it's just the schizophrenia kicking in. Basic federalism principles, the idea that federal law trumps state law. Mary J may have been legalized in a given state, but you're still breaking federal law, which still classifies green herb as a Schedule I controlled substance. So sure, the state police won't arrest you, but the DEA can still arrest you. Furthermore, and I can't stress this enough, if you're in federal territory of any kind, green herb is illegal. California respects medical green herb. If you have a card, that's great. But once you step into Yosemite National Park, it is illegal, and the Eastern District of California is more than welcome to prosecute your rear end for possession. It's strange, I would have thought that a national park would be a great place to wander off, have some green herb, and feel close to nature. Although I feel like this particular law isn't going to stop many people from doing so. Age of consent. Most states have a sliding scale. In Missouri, it's 17, but if you're under 21, your partner can be 14 years old. However, laws on publishing videos and pictures of it are different for obvious reasons. You can legally do the deed with your 17-year-old partner, but you can't take pictures of it. There is case law exactly on this situation. Also, marginal tax rates, more accounting than legal, but they are tax laws. A lot of people believe that your entire income is taxed at a certain rate based on how much income you made that year. Rather, it's a sliding scale where the first portion is not taxed at all, then another portion is taxed at a low percentage, then the next portion is taxed higher, and so on. If I knew the percentages, I would quote them, but I'm not looking them up. Sadly, the ACA was not created this way and can create some really dangerous income issues for people receiving subsidies. Oh man, I'm an engineer and some of my coworkers still don't understand marginal tax. You'll still hear talk of, I hope I only get a 2.9% raise this year, because 3% will bump me up into the next tax bracket. It's baffling. Some of the most commonly misunderstood ones, they can't arrest a husband and wife for the same crime. If you don't sign any documents, you can't be found guilty. Yar, take to the sea. Do not remove this tag under penalty of law except by the consumer. No, you won't go to jail for ripping tags off mattresses or pillows. The consumer is allowed to remove the tag. Are you sure? Actually, yes and yes. The tags are regulated for businesses that sell them, so the consumer can know what they're buying. So this all came about because at one point, companies were advertising one thing and selling consumers something else. There are so many cases where government regulation makes sense and is the only thing protecting the swimmers from the sharks. Exactly. Without these tags, manufacturers could fill mattresses, pillows, etc. with any material, even material from used mattresses. Yuck. Once you buy it, you can rip the tag off. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to pull rank on you. I didn't want to have to do this. I'm with the mattress police. There are no tags on these mattresses. I get tons of calls asking if they can get a divorce for adultery or abandonment. This is despite the fact that most states, Ohio and New York being the only holdouts, did away with fault divorce over 30 years ago. In Kentucky, we went no-fault divorce in 1973. Long story short, in an argument with my then-wife while on the phone with my lawyer, found out she had cheated, she screamed that infidelity was not grounds for divorce. My lawyer replied, "She is correct, but infidelity is grounds for a custody suit." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm in law school right now, and many people in Germany don't exactly know the lifelong prison sentence. It's not really lifelong like some people believe. It's imprisonment for an indefinite time period, but minimum 15 years. The average lifelong prison term is about 20 years. This varies by country, and in the USA, by state. If you get a life sentence in the state of Pennsylvania, you will die in prison, barring appeals or revocation of sentence. Other states, like California, are like Germany, where a life sentence can mean you're eligible for parole after a predetermined amount of time. Lawyer here. All of them. People are idiots. Redditors especially. Breaking Bad taught me that, contrary to popular belief, undercover police officers are not required to answer truthfully when you ask, "Are you a cop?" Long story short, don't sell substances. I never quite understood how people could believe this was possible. Probably because they confuse it with entrapment. Entrapment is baiting people unreasonably to do something they wouldn't normally do. Undercover is pretending you're not a cop to see what people normally do. Bird law. People think they can keep hummingbirds as pets, but they're illegal tender. Not saying I agree, it's just the bird laws in this country. It's not governed by reason. Let's say you and I go toe-to-toe on bird law and see who comes out the victor. Filibuster? Thank you to everyone for furthering this debate on the very important points of law raised in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. How your stuff gets distributed when you die. No, it doesn't all go to your husband or wife most of the time. No, your $10 LegalZoom rocket lawyer will is not good enough most of the time. Estate planning attorneys don't pay the bills by selling wills or power of attorney. People who die without wills or with poorly drafted wills keep our lights on. When my father died intestate, that is, without a will, the laws of the state specified that half of his estate went to his wife, my mother, and the rest was divided amongst his children, me, my brother, and my half-sister. That was simple enough until my half-sister became estranged from the rest of the family and was out of touch with my mother, her stepmother. And then my father's mother died intestate, leaving money and property to my father's estate and his living sister, my aunt. My father's share of my grandmother's estate needed to be split, half to my mother and 1/6 to each of my father's kids, but nobody knew where my half-sister was. Eventually, several years later, a company wanted to acquire rights to some of the property that had been my grandmother's. An agent of that company had to track down all the heirs, and discovered that my half-sister had died. That agent was then in the awkward position of telling my mom that her stepdaughter was dead. Oh wow, I've been waiting for this question. Being protected from discrimination does not mean that you're protected from buttholes. In other words, your employer or co-worker is allowed to decide he doesn't like you, which means he's discriminated between you and another person, so long as he hasn't made that decision based upon your race, color, or religious belief. In other words, you're not entitled to employment. The only thing you're entitled to is to not be discriminated against based on something out of your control, such as your skin color or your gender. The age at which a child in the United States can decide which parent they wish to reside with is, wait for it, 18. Yeah, that's right. If you're a child, you're not allowed to make decisions for yourself. That is up to the family court judge to make based upon the best interests of the child. We have free speech in this country. That means that if someone says something to you that you don't like, you can't sue them for libel or slander unless all of the following apply. Number 1, it's false. 2. It's been communicated to a third party, not just to you. 3. It affects your reputation for morality in the community. And 4. You have suffered either or both emotional and physical health repercussions as a result of the statement, or financial repercussions, or all 3. There are certain things that, if said, do not require number 4, such as a statement that you have a venereal disease. That's called slander per se, but these are rare statements, so usually you need number 4. Double jeopardy, thanks to the movie of the same name. Please expand. What is misunderstood about this? In the movie, a woman is convicted of murdering her husband. Once she gets out, she finds out that he's still alive and set her up for murder. She then hunts him down and murders him for real because she can't be tried for the same crime twice. Double jeopardy actually means you can't be tried twice for the same instance of crime, but it doesn't mean that if you were falsely accused of one crime, you now have free rein to go commit that crime for real. In that situation, the two crimes are not the exact same occurrence of a crime. One was a previous crime, and one was a totally separate, later crime. As another example, let's say Guy A is arrested for beating up Guy B on charges of assault and battery. Years later, Guy A beats up Guy B again. Arresting and trying him a second time would not be a double jeopardy in the real world, but it would be under the logic of the movie. A good way to demonstrate the other side of double jeopardy is the O.J. Simpson case. He was tried in criminal court, possible prison sentence, and found innocent. He was later tried in civil court, basically only fines and settlements, and found guilty. Double jeopardy means that you can't be tried for the same instance of a crime in the same court. You can still be tried in the other, civil and criminal court, for the same instance of the crime. So don't go write a book about how you committed a crime after getting off at one court. Actually a lawyer here. And there haven't been many stories from other actual lawyers here because we don't want any of you to think that we've given you some kind of legal advice that you're going to end up relying on that turns out wrong for wherever you live. For example, if you're in Ohio, I could probably give you some solid advice. Any of the other 49 states or any other countries? Not so much. Sure, there are general rules that we all get from the SCOTUS, but even that can be open to interpretation by lower courts, and SCOTUS typically set floors or ceilings. Miranda, for example, sets forth the minimum warnings that police are supposed to give you. Some state could easily add more warnings to that. So it makes it kind of hard for us to give you guys advice on this stuff because depending on where you live, we might be wrong. There we have it, folks. I will note that I remove a lot of the not a lawyer headings because otherwise they get repetitive, and we should take note that most of these posts are both from the questioned profession and bystanders. I just pick the stories that seem credible-ish and entertaining. A hostile work environment is not illegal in and of itself, it's only unlawful if, among other things, the hostility is based on a protected characteristic such as race, gender, age, disability, religion, etc. In short, it's not illegal for your boss to be a butthole, it's illegal for the butthole to single people out because they belong to a protected class, though. I think people commonly confuse assault and battery. Assault is threat of imminent harm. Battery is unlawful physical contact. In the UK, if I punch you from behind, that's battery. If you see me punching you, assault and battery. Assault is fearing imminent violence upon yourself. It's not someone punching you. It's what happens before someone punches you and you fear being attacked. In Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms only protects you from the government impeding the rights laid out in the document, not from other private entities doing it. My divorce lawyer friend says common law marriage. There are only 9 states that recognize it, and even then it's not clear-cut. Someone will be breaking up with someone after 10 years and tell her they get half, right? Because of common law marriage. Sorry, not in this state, she always has to tell them. In the US, specifically Texas, jurisdictions vary, you do not have the right to a free attorney for criminal cases. The law states that you have the right to have an attorney represent you. If you cannot afford one, then one will be provided for you. My judge, an IMA prosecutor, routinely denies the public defender for people requesting a lawyer after looking at their financial situation. The person who throws the first punch is not necessarily the offender. New Zealand here. No, you can't sue anyone like they do in America. Full stop. End of story. Don't ask me again. Get out of the courthouse. You don't need a body to prove a murder. You just need to show so much evidence that a missing person is dead and has been murdered by the suspect to prove murder. This has led to some misunderstandings. There are 2 falsely held beliefs that are sort of related. One, that you never have to give the police your consent to a search. If they have the ability to search your car or property, they wouldn't be asking you for consent. You wouldn't believe how many people don't understand this. 2. The police and their agents can and will lie to you. People seem to think driving under the influence means actually driving. Drunk and in your car with the keys within reach? Yeah, that's a DUI. Doesn't matter if the engine wasn't running, at least in most states. Which, to be fair, is a pretty crappy law, but you're right about how it works. Not a law per se, but the concept of judicial review. I'm amazed at how many people struggle with the idea that when the US Supreme Court hands down an opinion on a question of federal law, be it constitutional law, statutory interpretation, or what have you, that the court's word is final. That is, of course, until the law changes, from a constitutional amendment, congressional repeal, modification, enactment of statute, etc. Freedom of speech means that the government can't arrest you, fine you, etc. for anything you say, barring conspiracy to commit a crime or hate speech. It in no law protects you from any other consequence, such as an employer firing you, an establishment banning you, etc. Jury nullification. This isn't some hidden constitutional trick. It's a de facto circumstance through which a jury can acquit a person who would otherwise be guilty under the law if the jury disagrees with the law. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card, and it almost certainly won't work for you when you shoot at police for violating your constitutional right to live in a tree or whatever. At-will employment? Yes, you can probably be fired for that. No, you probably can't sue your employer. Proving discrimination in an isolated circumstance is almost impossible. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.